Good afternoon and welcome to another in our Saturday Sports Special program. And what do you know? Our guest this afternoon has not been in the public or in the spotlight, and for reasons. And it took quite a while, quite a bit of persuasion, I should say, to get her, and I say her, on the program this afternoon, because after listening, inquiring, chatting, it was imperative to expose our next guest. And, after so many months of having the likes of Sir Walter, and we had Ray Roberts, we had Kirani James, we had so many others. It's the first time, basically, we'll have someone in the female gender who will be speaking to us. We had others who would have spoken probably on just track and field, for example, the Amanda Crawford, Candicia Scott. We had Ishana Charles in the Paralympics. And we also had Glennis Roberts, who are basically speaking as president of the Netball Association. But this time we have someone who can probably, spread their wings, because it's not just netball. It involves basketball, football, badminton. I mean, just name the sport. I probably think golf too. But let me welcome no other person than Mrs. Michaele Hercules to our program. Good afternoon to you, Michaele.
Good afternoon, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure. And I guess folks will be going crazy because they're seeing Michaele for probably the first in a long time, and those who would have heard the name before is seeing Michaele Hercules. First of all, let's hear from you. How have you been coping with the pandemic, Michaele?
Well, I would say pretty good. And thank you again for inviting me, and welcome to all of your viewers, your listeners, to this afternoon's program. COVID-19, I guess I've reached the age, Michael, where I've learned to follow instructions pretty well. So I am washing my hands regularly. I and I'm keeping my social distancing, practicing my 6 feet.
Right.
So I'm following instructions to the T.
Right. That's good.
I think it has paid off thus far.
Right. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. So let's get the ball rolling, because we have quite a lot to get past this afternoon. But first of all, Michaele, it will be interesting to know. I mean, with so many titles, and which we will go into after in terms of what you have accomplished during your tenure as a sportswoman, how you got involved in sports, the very early days.
I think I always had a natural aptitude for sports, period. I learned very quickly. I want to start off very early by quoting something that Roy St. John, our former Minister of Sports, for all sports, to be a good athlete, to be a good sports person, man or woman, you had to have at least 90% intelligence and 10% skill. And I think I was fortunate in my time. Most of the athletes, we are very quick. We learned very quickly. We learned from what we saw. You didn't have coaches per se, especially except when you got to a certain level. So you learned very quickly. And I think I had a natural aptitude for learning quickly any type of sport. If you want to be specific in a particular discipline, yes, I could say how I got into netball. I could say how I got into track and field. I could say how I got into badminton. I could say I got into women's basketball and women's soccer, which I played in college when I went to study in England. So, do you want to take a discipline or
yes, we can go one at a time, because and probably let's start with track and field.
Let's start with track and field. Okay, well, track and field, I would say I learned to run primarily out of fear in the very early at a very early age. When I was 2 years old, my mother traveled to England to seek a better life, and so left me with my grandmother, who at the time lived in Vincennes, St. David. So I grew up for the next 3 or 4 years with my grandparents in Vincennes and went to school at the St. Teresa's RC school. So after a while, my grandmother moved to St. George's, where by that time, her own children had gotten jobs, in St. George, and she would go down from time to time, but she made a permanent move. And she never thought then, and of course I followed my grandmother, but she never thought then of transferring me, or nobody ever mentioned it. So I was actually living in St. George's, but went to continue to go to school in Vincennes. So every Monday morning, I would catch Bella Marie as a young child, 6, 7 years old, at the top of Government House, the roundabout. With, Bella Marie at the time was a bus, the old wooden buses driven by a man named Mr. Alban, and his conductor was Zephyrin. And I would catch Bella Marie at the top of the roundabout at Government House every Monday morning, and come back down with Bella Marie every Friday afternoon, which meant that I had to stay with the relatives and friends or whoever in Vincennes. And so at one particular time, I was stayed with my uncle's in-laws in Pitié Time. And for those of you at my age and who still remember what Pitié Tang looked like then, it was past Ashendon Propagation Station, past the actual water plant, and it was a colonial house, an old colonial house, right up in the hills, actually in the hills in that area. Now, between Ashendon Cocoa Station and the Ashendon, Cocoa Station as it was then, and the water plant, there was a strip. It's about 60 yards or so. And I'm saying yards because that is what it was in the time, 60 to 80 yards. And I had to pass that strip that was full of bamboo that made all these creaking noises every time you walk, every time you pass there. And of course, the local myth at the time was that there was the Lajables and whoever lived in the bamboo. So, of course, you were scared as hell as children every time you passed. So every time I had to walk the road to go home, to and from, you had to literally take speed as it was, and just, wind yourself up and run as fast as you could to cross that strip. So that happened for a couple of years. So that's why I say I ran out of fear, because I learned how to run fast to get past the Lajables. And later on, when I was preparing for scholarship, as we called it then, I think it's now the 11 plus or whatever it is now. But when I was preparing for that, there were times that I had to go. I don't know, I can't remember the reason why, but I did have to go to St. David's Secondary School, where it is there now, for extra lessons. And obviously, again, I had to walk past through Providence Cocoa. And again, it was a very scary area. I mean, Providence Cocoa in in the late 50s, 60s, I mean, it was a scary place to pass. You didn't even want to drive there, much less to walk. But during the winter months, or in December, late winter for you, but late in September, November, December, when the sun starts setting earlier, obviously at 6 o'clock in the evening, outside was already pitch dark. So coming from St. David's after lessons, again, I had to take speed from the top of the hill in Providence and run all the way through that cocoa until I got to Corinth Junction, before heading up to Dudma to go back up to Pitié Tang. So it was very scary. And so it was a case where I was just literally running for my life.
Well, yeah, so you ran out of fear?
Ran out of fear.
All because of the Lajables stories, right?
The Lajables stories in Providence Cocoa, in Ashendon, wherever it was.
But it paid off. But that paid off, though. That paid off.
It did. Because eventually when I went into St. Joseph's Convent, I wasn't so good, funny enough. I wasn't such this great athlete. Hazel Hurley, now Bazinski, always beat me in certain things in school. In those days, of course, convent had their sports, what we call the backyard sports. and all our sports took place on the tennis court. And Hazel was always my arch rival in school for sports. And she always won in the prep when we were prep and sub junior. But from the time I became a junior, it seemed as if I got better and I was the better athlete from then on. So we represented Convent too in intercall. And in the early years, we never did get anywhere because, as I said, in those days, we didn't have the exposure that other schools and so had. But we eventually worked our way into winning the intercall for the first time in 1972. I think that year as well, not I think, that year, intercall was also in the boys section, intercall was won by PBC. So we had celebration, if you would call it that, a celebration on the hill, because both SJC and PBC won intercall in 1972. But just before that, leading up to that, Tony Henry had come in from Trinidad in about 1966, 67. His family had migrated from Trinidad to here. I don't know the reason why, but Tony came, Pat Henry, who owned Coconut Beach, and so her bigger brother, they all moved, the family moved to Grenada. And Tony was involved in sports athletics in Trinidad. And he came here and decided to open a club, and he opened Long Island Striders Club. And recruited people like Hazel, myself, Elizabeth Pilgrim. I don't remember who the others were, quite frankly. I don't think there were much more. And started coaching us because we didn't belong to any clubs. They had the prevailing clubs, I think at the time, were Jet Stars. I don't remember who. Dauntless, of course, was the men's side, Dauntless and Atoms and what have you. But Tony recruited us. And I think that is where we started to really develop as athletes with his coaching, that I was able to work my way up gradually. So it wasn't just Convent. The same year, I was a member of the Grenada team participating in Windward Islands Championships in St. Lucia. And we won that year as well. I do believe that I was the first female athlete to win a gold medal in track and field for Grenada in a regional tournament, of course, because Carifta had not yet been introduced. They were working on Carifta, which happened later in the year. So before Carifta, I had the opportunity with Tony's tutelage to be able to represent Grenada in the Independence Games in Barbados, and as I said, the Windward Islands Championships in St. Lucia. So I guess it paid off in that way, yes.
Okay, so while you were speaking there, and some a matter of let's see, proof. But before we get to that, let me just give a shout out to some of your folks already. Andrea is saying, "Hey, my former French tutor." Michelle, good morning. Andrea, that's Saint Bernard, some Andrea, whatever.
Yes, Andrea Saint Bernard. Mitchell.
Okay, right, Mitchell.
Yes.
Yeah, former French tutor. That is something we'll have to get to as well, because it seems you spoke French. And
I did. Right. Let me just address it very quickly. But I did do I got a scholarship to France, a government scholarship to France in 1980. And I did do translating, interpreting in France for a few years before I came back. So when I came back, I helped some GC O-level students with their French, which was very difficult for most people at the time. And Andrea was one of my students, and she did well. She did well.
Okay. And then there is Tora Depredine is saying, I always thought Michelle was a Wharf girl, but she is one of we still.
But I am a Wharf girl in a way, because my mother, when I was born, my mother lived on the Carenage, but my first couple years was spent in River Road.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
She moved to River Road, and then when she went away, I went to stay with my grandparents.
Okay, then I hope you got that, Toro. River Road was mentioned. That's where sporting talents come from. That's where sporting talents come from. But you mentioned the St. Joseph Convent, St. George's senior team.
Correct.
That was 1972, right?
That was
Right.
1972.
And that's you,
The picture
right?
you're seeing on screen is
And your
our
circle.
senior team. And again, this is where you had to be persuasive because my memory is not as good, obviously, as it used to be. And I really didn't want to offend some people, but there are a couple of people that I just don't remember. But standing next to me is Janet Hurley. That's Hazel Hurley Bezinski, bigger sister. Janet was our coach at the time because we didn't have a coach. Elizabeth Pilgrim, who I wouldn't say would have been the most likely successor to be a coach, she had finished school and I think had gone away to study. So during that year, Janet was the substitute coach for our team. To Janet's right is myself, and to my right is Anne-Marie Johnson. Anne-Marie Cox. Anne-Marie Johnson. I think she's no Cox. I do not remember the name of the girl next. I'm seeing her face, but the name is not coming. Hazel is stooping with one of the trophies. And to Janet's left is Mary Williams. I don't know if, you're too young to remember, but some of the viewers will. The Williams sisters from Fontenoy. And there was Mary, there was Sally who did high jumps. There was Esther who was after Mary. They all were pretty good athletes. I do not know the person. I can't recognize the person to the left of Mary, and then to the left of that unknown person is Joan Pivot.
Oh, Joan Pivot, right?
Now deceased, great athlete. And stooping to the left of Joan Pivot is, I think that's Pamela Adolphus. I may be wrong, but I think that's Pamela Adolphus. But that was the senior team at the games, and I think we won the intercall on the last race on the medley relay. That's when we won the games.
Okay, then, folks, way back when, 1972, you said, right?
That was 1972. And that was a good year, as I said, because that was also the year we won the Windward Islands Championships.
Okay,
and you have a picture of that.
That was the Windward Islands Championship, and that's the team. That's Old Queens Park.
No, that's actually in St. Lucia.
Sorry,
that's in St. Lucia. We took that in front of the stadium in St. Lucia.
Okay, and that's you. I've circled you there, and I can see some of the folks there, like Donald Pierre is at the back.
Donald Pierre is at the back. Yeah. To his right is let me see if it's Roy or Raymond. That's Roy. To the right is Roy. And to Roy's right is one of the Garrett brothers, the cyclists. I mean, they were just unbeatable in their time. At that particular games, the Garrett brothers, they won all the cycle races, and it infuriated the St. Lucians so much. I mean, every event that we took part in with cycling, they won it. Grenada either came in 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, but we won everything with cycling. Mm-hmm. And stooping in front of Garrett is this guy was a police officer. What was his name? Thomas Lawrence. He did field events. And then there's me. There's a young lady from high school, from the Anglican high school on the team. Let me start with the Anglican high school. I don't remember her name. I think it was Molly Mosley, and I've tried for years to get her real name. She had a nickname we called her by. I don't even remember it either, but I'm sure somebody looking at the photo would remember her. The last place I know she was in St. Vincent. She had moved to St. Vincent, and I just don't remember the name. Esther Williams, who was a sprinter from high school. As a matter of fact, Esther was faster than I was, but she was a Seventh-day Adventist, and so couldn't compete on weekends. So she never got the opportunity to travel. I think Esther only ran in maybe intercall or whatever, but she never ran in any other big meet that we had in the park. But she was one of the best female athletes. Apart from myself, I would say she has been one of the fastest. Patsy Thomas to a certain extent. And Esther couldn't go to St. Lucia. So this young lady, I think, took Esther's place. And I think she did the medium 4, the 8 and the mile or something like that. And then there's Sally Williams, who is the bigger sister of Esther, of Mary Williams, who you saw in the convent photo. And that's Hazel next to the left of Sally. And that's Roger Pear to Hazel's left.
Oh, Roger, that's
cyclist.
the
Leslie Pear's son.
Leslie Pear's son. Okay.
Yes,
sorry,
he's in
right.
He's back in Grenada now.
Right.
Roger is there. In the middle row is Mr. Raymond Roberts. He's now deacon or minister, I think, of the Anglican Church.
Anglican Church, yeah. Long distance runner, right?
Long distance runner. And then there's Raymond, quarter miler, the 2, the 4. Russell Lambert, who was, top gun at the time, sprint 1 and 2. And go back to the right, you have Gordon Danderward. Remember Danderat?
Danderat.
Yeah. Everybody knows him as Danderat.
Danderat, yeah.
Gordon Ward.
Right.
He was the coach. To his right, you have Oliver Lake. He was a jumper and a sprinter.
River Road?
Pardon me?
River Road?
River Road. So I think he may have been a part of Queen's Park. I'm not sure if they had a club or Jet Stars. He may have been a part of Jet Stars.
Yeah.
To his right is Tony Antoine. Tony used to go to McDonald College. I think he was a good sprinter. Tony did, I think, from the 1 to the 4, if I'm not mistaken. But when he came to live in St. George's, he joined Long Island Striders Club, which was Tony Henry's club. Responsible for nurturing a lot of great athletes like the same Donald Pear. So people like Donald Pear and Tony and Hazel and myself, we were all in Long Island Striders, as opposed to O'Lake and the Lanes and Russell. I think they were all in Jet Stars. But this was the Windward Islands Championships in 1972 in St. Lucia, which we won. And we won because of our baton passing. Because the St. Lucians were pretty good on one-on-one as sprinters. So they won the 100 meters men. They won the 200 meters men. But our passing, which was taught to us by Tony, that is where this passing, putting your hand up to get the baton. So it was like up and, the baton in your hand, and it was pretty new. So although St. Lucia had the fastest sprinters, because of our baton passing, we were able to win the relays. Oh my goodness, they were mad because they were still passing the baton underneath, like you wait until the person gets to you and then you run. But by the time they had the baton, we were way ahead in front because of the baton passing. So we are kind of revolutionary. And that's how we beat St. Lucia. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, the amount of points that Grenada accumulated at that games surpassed the total points for St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Dominica, plus 8. So we really did whip them at that tournament.
All right.
I personally came back home with 7 medals, 4 gold, 2 silver, and a bronze.
Wow.
And in those days, you had to do a little piece of everything. You had to be track and field as well as field events.
Okay. But Michelle, you never mentioned anything about playing pan. I'm saying you played pan with Angel Harp. So
I can't wait. I was a big girl then.
So you were one of everything then?
I'm happy to say also the first. We were the first girls, the convent girls, I think around that time as well in 71, 72. We played pan and we were taught by Angel Harp, by the members of Angel Harps, Depot and Maga and David and other names, Richard and Fraser, a few other the other guys. And we had the first female pan side, if you could count. I mean, we what's the word? We played, at different. We used to play often in concerts. We had concerts in St. Joseph's Convent. I remember time there was a show in the Regal Cinema now. I've forgotten what, Reno. But at that time, that's where a lot of things happened. And
all that happened while you, as a schoolgirl, eh?
All that happened while I was in school. And again, another first, Again, I might be a little. I don't want to make sure I leave. I want to make sure that I call everybody's names because it was a team. But we had people like Regan Ned. We had again same Hazel Hurley Bazinski. We had Maureen, the Code sisters, Maureen and Brenda. We had Jennifer Gary. We had Annette Philip Cunningham on the on bass. We had Angela Radix, Jenny Pradam Sherman. We had quite a few, who else am I now? There are quite a few, Cecilia John, Agnes Knight. We were the first, Marlene Noel. We were the first steel band girls, if you could call it that. And we performed, that's the word I'm looking for, at the highest level. And the guys, I think, were very proud of us. We did well. We were really tops. I think they were really, really proud of us. There's a long story to that, but I'll let Regan maybe tell it one day. We were looking at having a reunion depot, so stand by. And don't stand down, just stand by.
I love that one. Yeah.
So we looking to do that, Regan says, one day, a little reunion. So, but we were really good without beating my chest too much, but we were really, really phenomenal.
Okay, because Toro is actually saying this would have been Grenada's fully constituted all-female steel band. Clev is saying, let me see, recipient of Angel Harp's Pioneer Award.
Yeah, I think on this either the 75th anniversary, I think, of Angel Harps, if I'm not mistaken, either the 50th or the 75th. I think it was the 75th that we did. Yes,
okay,
we were recognized.
All right. But while you were speaking there were a couple. I think it was Hazel Regis Buckles. When you see Buckles and once you see OLY, it's an Olympian. Hercules, thank you for inspiring me. So much so that she's feeling part of it. But here is this interesting one. Harold Pisey is saying, I have a bone to pick with you.
Hi, Harold. Haven't seen or heard him in a while.
He says, as a radio announcer in Grenada, Michelle always stopped me on the streets to discuss word pronunciation and other general speaking standards. Why in heaven's name you never pointed out that we were spelling your name incorrectly?
Well, there's a little story to that. When I went into my mother, when she was pregnant with me, wanted a boy. And when I came along, I'm very disappointed. And she had already determined the name was going to be Michael. And there I am, I came along and this girl, and she had seen, I think, some French or Italian film with this lady called Michaele. So she decided, oh, great, I'll add the E at the end, and her name is Michaele. Of course, in that time, people in the village, in Vincennes and other places, and they would say, well, her name is Michael, And so everybody in Vincennes would either call me Michael or Mickey. And then I entered St. Joseph's Convent, and the nun said to me, oh, you can't come in here with a boy's name. So as of today, your name is Michelle. And of course, in those days, you can't quarrel with the nuns. You just had to do as you were told. The church reigned supreme. So I became known as Michelle. But I continue to spell my name the right way. So there are very few people who ever call me Michaele. Ricardo Keynes Douglas, who knew that recently, and he now insists every time he sees me, how is Michaele today? And Margaret Frances Payne, before she died, once she knew that my name was Michaele, started calling. But other than that, people call me Mickey, as people who knew me for a long time, or Michael. Some people still call me Michael. And other than that, all through my convent life, it has been Michelle, and people, I answer to it, but I always spell it correctly. So sorry, Harold.
And just to add to that, I have to say that my big daughter's name, Michaela,
yes,
was Michelle who gave me that that name.
Well, yes, because my daughter is Michaela, because I'm very conceited with the names. My son is Michael. I am Michaele. My daughter is Michaela. It's all Michael with an E at the end, Michael with an A at the end, or Michael. And so you liked my daughter's name, and you were Michael, so you called her, man. Thanks for that.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, then. So that was a lot in terms of how you got involved in Well, and
In
again,
track and field. In track
run,
and field.
yes, run out of fear. That's the word.
Right.
That's the phrase we
Yes.
have to use. You run out of fear.
Yeah.
And it's so much different to others who would have probably had the raw talent, as we'll say, but because of the so-called stories in those days, larger blessed and what have you, you had to run.
I was
And
running for my life, man.
right, and even in addition to that, I think there wasn't even the street lights and thing to, you know.
There weren't any street lights. As a matter of fact, many a time, coming from Vincent's on a Friday afternoon. So when school finished at 3 o'clock, I had to rush to get to the Vincent's medical station to meet the bus, Bella Marie, to come back down to St. George's, because don't forget, I lived in St. George's too. So, and if I was late for 5 minutes and missed Bella Marie, I had to walk from Vincent's medical station to Pedmata Junction to catch the bus coming from the bottom road. And if I didn't catch, if for some reason I was too late, I didn't run fast enough again, and I also did a little bit of long distance. If I didn't run fast enough, I had to walk from Pedmata Junction to Belmont. No street lights. I mean, I swear, if I were in another country, I would have been dead or something by now. But I mean, the reality is that I think all of that strengthened me and trained me for it. It was tough. It was tough. It wasn't, no street lights, the roads were not as good, and I walked. I remember there was a time an old man, and well, old to me at the time because I was about 9, 10, and gave me a ride. And when I got home, my grandmother was furious. Do you know who it was you took that ride with? But didn't have a choice. I was so grateful for the ride back then. But it was not easy. Basically, what I'm saying, it wasn't easy. Even when we went to convent and we started training in the park in Queen's Park, and so we ran barefooted. I mean, we didn't get spikes until I must have been the first female. I remember, the excitement when I got my first spikes to run it. Queen's Park at the time was a mud surface, earth. And it was very hard on our feet. I'm suffering from it now. I'm arthritic in my right leg, in my right knee. But those were the conditions. They were very, very, very tough. Had we had the facilities, the resources that now are available and sitting idle in Queen's Park now, I think we would have done wonderfully well. Not just me, but my male counterparts as well. I mean, the conditions under which we trained, they were not great, but they were very good. It was good coaching from both Dandarat, Tony, people like that, who were the coaches at the time.
Okay. And then in addition to track and field, and we'll come back to track and field because we have to take it to the next level, okay? But then you also excel in netball. How you got started in netball?
How did I get involved in netball? Well, as we stayed in Belmont, as I said, I went to school because when my grandmother moved from Vincent's, we moved to Belmont. And Joan St. Bernard had a little club. And every time during the summer, she would have, she would have young people, we do things, get creative, play games and what have you. And I remember being that's where I met Hazel. Hazel and I have been lifelong friends. And we knew each other. Hazel lived in Paddock, I lived in Belmont. And we knew each other from since then. And we were in this club and we would go sometimes to see the games played in Botanical Gardens, because that's where the netball court was, by the summer house in the Botanical Gardens. The netball court was there. There was a young lady who went to school in Anglican High School, Ova Williams. I loved Ova. She was fast. I think my playing style actually came from looking at Ova Williams, and to a lesser extent, Jenny Woodruff. Jenny Wells at the time. I used to like the play. So I used to look at Ova play, and Joan would bring us to take part in these little competitions among ourselves and get us busy during summer. And so that's where I saw the sport. And of course, as I said, in those days, you learned from what you saw. So I picked up the game very easily. So when I went to convent, I don't even think I had to work out or anything for a place. I was just always automatically on the netball team as far as I knew. And if I'm not beating my chest again, I think if I wasn't on the team stood a greater chance of losing if I wasn't on the team. So people look forward to seeing me play. And that's how I got involved in netball. I think a lot of it had to do with Joan St. Bernard and her little club. And then it went on from there.
Okay.
It went on from there, yes, because I'm very fortunate to be to be on the first team, the first and only Grenada team to take part in a World Netball Tournament. And I was part of that team in 1979 in Trinidad. I'd played for Grenada before that regionally in Antigua in 1971. I went to when I left school in 73. When I graduated, I went to England to study about 2 weeks later. So I didn't take. But when I came back from England, I came back in 1977 or 78, and then got on the team again and played in the World Tournament in 1979 in Trinidad. And again, I want to talk about some of the people on the team because people don't even remember them.
Let me just put up that's
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's me. I was the flag bearer at the World Netball Tournament. And then you had people like Joan Pivot, who you cannot see in that photo because she's so short, but she's to my left. You can barely see her 2 feet between my legs. That's Joan Pivot there. We have Clotilda Eddy. We had who's behind Clotilda Eddy, who's to my right, facing, to Joan's right is Clotilda Eddy. Behind Clotilda, it's Sherry Ann Joseph. She is now Dunbar, Sherry Ann Joseph Dunbar. Behind Sherry Ann, there's June Salhab. Behind June, there's Cheryl Rose. Behind Cheryl Rose, there is Barbara Hobson. She was Barbara McSween Hobson. Behind Barbara, that's Amy Granger. She was the umpire, the referee. Behind umpire. Behind Amy, I think she was either English or Australian, I don't remember. She was the coach, Jolene Whiteman, and behind her, it's Yolan Wells Scott. That's Jenny Wells Woodruff's bigger sister. She was on the team as a delegate, I think. And on the left side, behind Joan Pivot, that's Brenda Rumpo Griffith. Behind her, that's Carol Hyacinth. And then that's Janice Celestine, I think, there. And the people that you are not seeing, I think it's Beverly Phillip, Anne-Marie Louison, and I believe Vida. I'm not sure if, I think Vida would be in the back there too somewhere. So
I was looking at that person who is where the red circle is around you and coming across their face. Isn't that Vida?
No. Okay. That's she used to play for Evergreen Jets. One of the teams I played for when I came back from France in 1982-83, Evergreen Jets, and that's Brenda Rumpo Griffith.
Okay,
and she used to play for Evergreen Jets. No, Vida was tall, so she was in the back.
Oh, okay, right. So that's 19.
Initially, I don't think Vida was on the team initially. But I don't know. I can't remember what really happened, but Vida was eventually brought in because on the original team. But at a late stage, Vida did come into the team. But Vida did go with us to Trinidad.
Okay. And that's the 1979 World Netball Championship in Trinidad and Tobago.
That's correct. And it is the only time Grenada has participated. It's the only team that has ever taken part in a World Netball tournament. So it's good for netballers to know that sort of thing, because I don't think a lot of them do know that we even took part in a world tournament in 1979 and gave Australia, I think it was a run for their money too.
Okay, then. Let's get some of the comments there. I told you that all this while, Sister Gertrude, General Gertrude, kept the ranks in line.
Sister Gertrude is the one who agreed We have a lot to be thankful, especially with Pan, because of course in those days it was unheard of that convent girls would be playing Pan with the Wharf boys. I mean, the two just didn't go together. So all kudos to Sister Gertrude in giving her permission to let us venture into that world of Pan. And the guys, as I said, they respected us. There was great respect for Sister Gertrude and us, and they taught us well.
Okay, then. Other comment there coming from Joe Vincent. I like the show. I left home in 1971 and always thought I missed the good old days because my days I only got to go to, I don't understand, with presentation. I do remember some of the names. Thanks for the memories. And Toro is coming back. But I still vex with Michelle and Jenny and them for having us spending we last dollar to get into netball at the Caribbean Championship with Dan team and letting Trinidad beat them.
No, I'm sorry again. You guys have to apologize. I was not here. I think would have been in 1973, and I did make the team. If it was when we hosted in 73, 74, one of the two. I did make the team in 73, but I wasn't here because I left for England, and I wasn't here when the tournament was being held. I left in July, so although I was on the team, I had to give up my place up, obviously, and the tournament was in August.
Okay,
so I was not here when we hosted. So okay. You owe me an apology.
Okay.
Depot.
so that's track and field, netball.
Hold on, I want to go back a little bit to track and field, with a highlight, I think, in track and field. I forgot that one. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that I have the date right. It could be about 1997, 1998, 1987, 88. As I said, I went to study in France in 1980, where I did translating, interpreting. And when I came back to Grenada, the government didn't have a job for me because it's like, what are we going to do with French? Somebody doing French. So I went to work, obviously, in the, they said, well, you play sport well, so you go to the Ministry of Sport and be a coach. So after studying, I had to work for a little bit as a coach. We had, at some point in time, sorry, I lost my trend of thought. But you see what I'm talking about, Bascom, the challenge I take? Anyway, in 1988, I think the point I was trying to make, that when I came back from France, a few years after that, there was an opportunity to send a Grenada youth team to Albertville in France. I think France was vying to host either the Winter Olympics or something, and they had some money to give away. So they invited delegations from developing countries to come to France, countries who would normally have the opportunity to be in a Winter Olympics or anything like that, or to know how it works. And so I managed the team, mainly because I spoke French. I managed this team to Albertville, France. People on the team like Hermione Griffith and Rhonda Henry, Mohawk Steele had a son who was on the team, Kwesi Woodruff, Jenny's son. There was a guy called Sandy. His surname is Sandy. I don't remember his first name. He was a very good boxer. I think it didn't work out for him well. We thought he would get far, but it didn't work. People like that. So I took them to France. I managed that team to France. I think that was too a highlight, going with these youngsters to France and getting exposed to other sports as well. That was a big thing for us at the time.
Okay, but talking about going with the youngsters and things like that, so probably we can just have a little segue, and we'll come back to the other highlights some of the other sports. But you had that pleasure also of being among the first female to manage a men's football team.
Yes.
Let's hear about that.
Yes. Thanks to Ambrose Phillip. Ambrose was General Secretary of the GFA at the time. And there was this tournament in St. Lucia again, for the under-16 national tournament, the Windward Islands Championship, under-16 Windward Islands Championship. And he didn't even have anybody to send as manager per se. And he said, well, I'll send Michelle. And let me ask her. I mean, of course, I always, because of my interest in sports, because quite frankly, I take an interest in all sports. I follow all sports. Every little American football, sailing, you name it, I follow it. So Ambrose said to me, well, I'd like you to manage a team. And I was pregnant at the time with my second child. And I said, but Ambrose, he said, it doesn't matter. You could handle this. So you think. So I went off and I managed a team. Regrettably, I don't even remember some of the names. Ronald Joseph stands out. That's Eve Joseph's brother, I think. But I went to St. Lucia and we got there and the St. Lucians tried to steal the tournament by playing guys who were over 16 years. So we all, the other teams, St. Vincent, Dominica, Grenada, we all came in, we registered, we brought our passports, But St. Lucia would not submit theirs, and only to find out that the guys, their team had guys 16. I mean, you should have seen the sizes, Michael, of these kids playing these poor little 15, 16-year-olds from the other countries. And when it was time to play them, I refused to play my team. So the tournament came to a dead stop. And of course, they had to have an emergency meeting with all the presidents, and Ambrose had to fly up from Grenada to St. Lucia. And I stopped the tournament. I ended the tournament. So it ended in a little bit of furor because, they tried to cheat their way into a championship. But I did manage the under-16 football team, yes.
And manager Michaele Hercules had none of it.
That is the action Ambrose would have wanted me to take, to be firm and to be thing about it, but not necessarily the result of not completing the tournament.
Right. Yeah.
But I was the first female manager, and I think maybe the only one from Grenada to have ever managed a men's football team.
And I guess as much Ambrose Phillip, with his wisdom in terms of managing associations and things like that, had confidence in Michelle at the time to give her that assignment over so many others.
Yes. We've been friends since then and friends still now, because we also had an interface in badminton when he played in the later stages. But, I have always admired, liked, and respected Ambrose. And I think the feeling is mutual. Yeah. So we were very comfortable with each other. Mm-hmm. And he trusted, when Ronald Reagan was coming to Grenada, the GFA saw it as an opportunity to make some money. And he decided to do a supplement, I think it was in the Grenadian Voice, to raise funds to get companies to welcome Ronald Reagan to Grenada. And Ambrose said, how could I do this? Who can I ask to do it? And of course, Michelle to the rescue. And I had to go soliciting ads and so from these people. And it made them so much, he collected so much money at the time. I think it was the most money, at that time, I think it was in the 80s, early 80s, I might be wrong. I think it was somewhere 84, I don't remember. Whenever Reagan came to Grenada in 84, 85.
Just after the invasion time there, 85.
That's right, 84, 85. Yeah. It was the most money they'd ever raised in a fundraising venture. And he was so thrilled. I made a lot of money for the GFA. So, we go back a long time, and when he's in trouble, he calls me. So yes, I've done that. I've been the first female manager. And while you talk about, I was also chaperone, going back a little bit to track and field, of when we went to the Commonwealth Games in 1978. The team was Donald Pear and Conrad Francis and Jenny Boca. I can't remember who else was there. And Charlie Francis, I think now deceased, was the manager. Dandarat, now deceased, was a coach. Conrad, Donald, did I say Donald Pear? Yes. And I was a chaperone for Jenny Boca. So I also did that as an official capacity at the Commonwealth Games in Edmonton, Canada in 1978.
Okay. Yep. And just to confirm your contribution, the Hamlet is saying, the Grenadian Voice, it was our first color edition we printed at the Express.
At the Express, yeah.
Hamlet would know that because Hamlet defied Mr. Pierre and put the paper in color.
Yeah, but that was a GFA project.
Right. Okay. But it's a nice segue too, as you mentioned, Ambrose Phillip, because somehow the issue of badminton.
Yes.
Yes, and you were part of that that initial group of people who got badminton started in Grenada. Give us the whole story about how
Officially, it's not that
officially,
badminton
yeah,
started. People
yeah, I
played
should say,
badminton. I remember even
oh, in
when I
terms of
used
an
to study.
association and all of that as well. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, Hazel reminded me. I didn't really remember, but she said, "You remember we used to play badminton outdoor on the in the convent court, but that was outdoors. We had some teachers, some English person who was maybe teaching in convent at the time, maybe a Peace Corps or something, and I think they taught badminton there. But it was outdoor badminton, and outdoor badminton is really not the same as indoor. Um, Outdoor is fun, indoor is more competitive. But when I went to study in England in 1973 and I went to college, that's where I learned I learned badminton. And so when I came back to Grenada, Victor Loha, who was Victor, some y'all know him in New York, I think as George Loha, George Victor Loha. George was games master at GBSS still. They played badminton in GBSS, and I used to go up to play. And then we spoke eventually about, well, maybe we should start an association, a badminton association, which we had to sit down to do a constitution, and that was done by there were 5 of us who sat down. It was Ray Roberts, Leslie B. Clouden, he's now passed on. Charles Big Cheese Lashley, I think he moved to the Bahamas or someplace, or the Cayman or someplace like that, a long time ago. I've never seen him since the 70s, the 80s. So who did I say? Ray Roberts, Leslie Clouden, Charles Lashley, Victor Loa, and myself. The 5 of us sat down, and then we drafted a constitution for the Grenada Badminton Association. The unfortunate thing is we never got membership to the international body. We couldn't get into a membership because you have to have a minimum number of badminton clubs in the country to qualify for membership. So we sort of had observer status and had to pay a minimum fee or something like that, a small fee every year. The truth is that we didn't have the membership. There were very few people who paid. We didn't even have the membership. I mean, it was just a few of us. Nelson Snakehead Lewis, Stephen Snakehead Lewis, Nelson Lewis, Joyce Bartholomew. It was just a few people who came to play. Little Cheese, that was Big Cheese and Little Cheese, James Lashley, Little Cheese. So we had few people playing and we couldn't sustain. And most of the time, I paid the annual membership fee from my pocket to the international body. And then when I went to study in France in 1980, I was the general secretary. So we had the president and the general secretary and all of that. And when I went to study in France in 1980, everything just fell down because nobody wanted to take up the mantle. So when I came back from studying, I tried to start it again. And that's where Ambrose came in. He was in the second round, people like him and Winston Bullen and so on. Let me also say that Troy Garvey was in the first set. Troy and Alvin Clouden, they played in the 1970s before I went away. As a matter of fact, Troy, Alvin, and I attended a badminton workshop in Aruba in early 1980. The whole idea was to come back to develop further. But again, as I said, there just wasn't the interest to have a real place to play badminton. We sort of took refuge sometimes at the CSA Center. It was Public Workers Union Center, well, CSA before it became Public Workers Union. But we didn't really have a home, and we weren't able to grow the membership to the point where we could have been a full member of the International Badminton Federation. So when I went away again, it just fell again and never came back after that. So we had a few tournaments. I'm still the singles champion, the ladies singles champion. As I said, there were other people later on who played the sport, but played for fun rather than try to be competitive.
Okay. Interesting enough, Michelle, quite a lot in terms of that. In terms of badminton, and is a pity we haven't been able to get the sport to move forward. to move forward. Although up until recently, when I say recently, probably a few years, I know of Ray and even some of the names you call there. They played both badminton and tennis, because badminton was played in CSA, right?
Correct.
The Public Workers Union Center.
But we had scheduled times. There were scheduled days when badminton would be played and scheduled days when table tennis would be played. There were recent efforts. I know that there were a couple of people, Ambrose and a few others, June Sala before, and a few others used to play at the Raphael, forgotten Raphael's surname, James or Francis, I don't remember his surname. They played at the youth center. I think there's a court at the youth center in Grenada, and they would play there, and there were efforts to sort of revive the association, but I don't think that they managed to get it off the ground again.
Okay then.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
badminton.
Right. Track and field, netball, badminton. Well, we also covered some pan, But some pan. But you also were involved in, what should I say?
Women's basketball?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. What we at the time, it was sort of non-traditional, because you also played football, women's football. So let's start with the basketball first.
Okay, women's basketball came about. That was it again in the 1970s, and it was another first. That was on that first team again. Gordon Redhead Police, who I still consider the greatest basketball player we've ever had. And his brother, John Pussy Redhead, and others, Blondell Church at the time, they used to coach. Well, I'm saying coach in inverted commas. St. Joseph's Convent didn't really have a coach per se in my last years in school for netball, but they used to play basketball, and they would come to the convent on twice a week to help us. I think it was all in an effort to beat high school. High school have always been our rivals, and the main enemy, if you could call it that, for netball. And we were never able to beat the Anglican high school in netball, no matter how hard we tried. Gordon and Police and Pussy and the guys, Blondell and others, Bravo, a whole set of them, Iggy Leonard, Iggy Noel, they used to come and play with us to help us. Flyers and his brother Bessie come up to the convent to help us improve our skills, strengthen technique, to think the game and to work that out. So when an opportunity came in 1972, both of them were coaches in the Ministry of Sport, and they had a conversation with a guy, a gentleman, I think it was Mr. Paul or something, I can't remember his first name, out of Trinidad, Arima, Trinidad, and he wanted to bring up this women's basketball team to Grenada to play. And so what Police and Pussy did, because they were training us, I think it was mainly convent girls who did it in retrospect. And I only remember people like Franca Alexis Johnson, who's now leader of the NDC. Franca was on the team. I was on the team. I think June Salab was on the team. Joan Pivot was on the team. And we played this visiting team from Arima, Trinidad in 1971, 72, somewhere around there. So that was the first. They beat us. I think they beat us. I'm not sure, but I think they did beat us. That was because we were more playing. In all fairness, we played more netball and basketball. But, we dribbled and everything, but our shots were not basketball. I think I remember it was more like from the bottom as opposed to the top. But he had to rush to train this team to meet that basketball team from Arima. But we played well. I don't remember the result in that. Later on, in 1980, I don't remember, 80, I think. I think I had gone to England and come back. So there was a team, the same Pussy and Police, they made arrangements with a team, men and women, from the University of Southern Maine in the States to come to Grenada to play some games, to help to push the women's basketball thing in particular. And Police, I remember, coached the women's team, and Pussy coached the men's teams from Grenada to meet these teams. And I think the series ended 2-2, both 2-2. And but the people who played on that team were people like Vida and Janice and Anne-Marie Louison, I think, and a few others. And I managed that team in the 80s. So that is where my involvement with basketball came. Of course, I adored, basketball, in those days were in the 70s, was played on the Backstreet court in the police band house down there, police barracks in Backstreet on Melville Street. And so, of course, we had a lot of tournaments day in the night, and we would go down and support. And of course, Police was always, for me, the best player, the best thing we ever had. I think if he had access to the NBA in those days, he would have made it comfortably. He was really good. But he helped, and he tried to get women's basketball going as a coach. So that's where all of that came from.
And it's good to see that at that time, so many of the female who were actually netballers at the time were involved in playing, Just some... Ambrose Phillip is saying, Raphael Okel Joseph. That's the person.
Oh, yes. He's saying that for badminton, actually.
Yeah, for badminton, sorry.
In terms of playing at I couldn't remember Raphael's surname.
Yeah, and he said,
but they have been playing. And
Dr. Judith Antoine, last president of badminton, Okel secretary.
I know there was an attempt. I was invited to a meeting in the youth thing in the youth center. But as far as I know, that I didn't know it was active.
Okay, and Margaret Francis is saying, it was war between St. Joseph Convent and Anglican High School. So it was always that. And Siobhan Benjamin Francis, how I love this lady. I remember the days when Ray used to come to the studio and always had a little message from her when I made a mistake or mispronounced a word. Thanks much. You helped me a lot. That's Siobhan. Yeah, she's now residing in Canada.
I didn't even realize that she had moved.
Yeah, and she's saying thanks very much for the assistance. So I assume you used to pass the message on to Ray for her.
Yes.
And Ray used to relay, and she's appreciative of that. And Claire is saying, if anyone, male or female, were capable of stopping a football game of that caliber, had to be Michelle. Her name, Hercules, was symbolic of her strength, physically and intellectually. You were that physical in sports, Michelle?
Well, I let people speak to that. I think I had very good training from people like Police and so on. But I've always had a passion. I've always had the killer instinct in sports. I always wanted to win. I was driven by extreme passion for everything I think I did in sport. Because there was this, I just had to win at all costs. It almost sounds Kobe-esque, doesn't it? But yes, I challenged. Most people would say, oh my God, this woman is miserable. But that is because I challenged everything. So yes, if I agree with Siobhan to a point.
Okay. So let's go, before we go on to the women's football, I want you to tell me more about this photo. You don't know about it, but we do have it.
That may have been at the prize giving, the 70th celebration of the 75th or the 50th anniversary of Angel Harps. I think that's what it was.
Oh, so probably the fifth. Well, the black and white appears to be the 50th.
The 50th?
Well, could be. I
think it was just going. It's either the 50th or the 75th. To me, it sounds more reasonable to think that it was 75 because I don't know. That's a nice photo. What do you think?
Yeah. I recall somewhere earlier.
We represented the Convent Steel Band at that function. I think it was in Grand Beach. It was Ramada at the time. I think that's where it was. And Depot handing us, for our contribution to
So
the world of Pan.
Depot probably can clarify. I believe it's the 50th. If I'm not mistaken, it was mentioned somewhere earlier that
It was a 50th. Okay.
Toro is now saying it's the 50th, and he was the photographer.
Okay,
Toro was
thanks.
the
And
photographer.
we'd love to have a picture of that of our archives, a copy of that photo tour if you can.
Okay, so that's what making that presentation.
That's a nice photo.
Yeah.
I think the four of us there, which is Jenny Sherman, Cecilia John, well, of course myself, Anna Regan, Ned Menz, would really like to have a photo of that.
Okay, right, and so he says it's the 50th photo taker, and Toro, perhaps not 75. I will leave Ambrose and Toro to knock that out. But
it must have been the 50th. Yeah.
Former Sports Minister Adrian Spaceman Mitchell is saying, "Great joy listening to your story."
Yes, thank you, Spaceman. He was pretty good too at PBC. Yeah.
At PBC, okay.
Yeah. Well, he's an old PBC boy.
Yeah, I heard so. We'll mention a few about Spaceman in a while. But women's football, Michelle, that was one where you excel in as well. How you got involved with women's football?
Well, not in Grenada. While I was in college in England, I also, again, it was an indoor sport. It was 5-a-side women's football. And I was part of my college team and represented the college in all the county competitions that they had and we won as well. So that's where I got involved. When I came back to Grenada, it was my hope at some point that, women's football would have, we hadn't been there as yet. There's no way that anybody was thinking about women in football at that point in time. But it had always been my dream to get involved in it at some point in time. But that didn't happen. The closest I came is when I managed the under-16 men's football team, the under-16 football team.
Okay.
But that was my it didn't happen in Grenada. I only played in England.
Okay.
For my college at the time. Yeah.
And just for folks who have been hearing you mention the name Hazel a couple of times, her school friend, even up to this day, and she's referring to Hazel Bezensky, that the folks know. Hazel Bezensky, and the older folks will know as Hazel. What's the other?
Hurley. Hurley.
Hazel
Hurley.
Hurley
used to play netball as well. Her mother came from Trinidad, and she used to play netball as well. So she too had come from a sporting family, and her dad used to be an official at the Inspector Hurley. But I remember him as Inspector Hurley. I think he was higher than that, but he was also involved in track and field as an official. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she too has a sporting background.
You had the opportunity to represent Grenada as well in track and field championships. Was it the Carifta? Is it the 17?
No, I didn't go to Carifta. No, I went to the Windward Islands.
The Windward Islands Championship, representing the Windward Islands Championship. And you started as a schoolgirl.
Yeah, I did. I was, as I said, I started through convent, of course, running for convent, and then from being a part of Long Island Striders, which I'd mentioned before, which was started, the Long Island Striders Club, which was started by Tony Henry. So yes, I was. That's where I got my break, if you can call it that. In those days we had games like the Jetstar Sports and Whitsuntide Games, which was one of the biggest games in the Caribbean. You had Southern Games in Trinidad, you had Independence Games in Barbados, you had Whitsuntide Games in Grenada. But I think Jetstar Sports was more like a national sports, for all the different clubs and so. And I remember one year in the Jetstar Sports, I think that's when I really broke ground. And running for Long Island Striders, it was the relay. I think it was the last relay, I think. The relays, as you know, are always last. And Jetstars was their team was the favorite to win with Grace Barito, who was from River Road at the time. Grace Barito had to run the final leg of that relay. And we definitely were the underdogs. But I had the last leg to run against Grace. And of course, when Grace got the baton, she was about 5 or 10 yards ahead of me. And I was able to catch her and beat her. And I think that's, as I said, that's where maybe I broke ground, because when I won, I mean, it's like people were just like in an uproar. I remember the Lane brothers, Roy and Raymond, you know, although they were in Jetsstars, coming to me to and lifting me up, you know, because it was like, because Grace was the sprint queen at the time, and I'd beaten her at that sports. I'll never forget that. That was one of my fondest memories, actually, with track and field. Um, but those sports, I mean, they were. I was part of the Long Island Striders Club, and as I said, Tony was responsible for really and truly coaching some great athletes, Donald Pierre and Conrad and Tony Francis, and there was what's his name, Willan something, Willan Francis. His nickname is Sprangs. For you know, really, we really had some really good athletes. So Striders produced some.
And
I'm grateful to Tony for all.
And you had an opportunity to go off on a scholarship.
I did. I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me. One of the games, the Whitsuntide games, because Tony had the contacts with the people from Trinidad, as I said, he would bring up famous people. And on the ladies' side, of course, there was the sprinter at the time from Trinidad called Joan Porter. Joan Porter, we looked so similar. We short and red and, you know, together, you know, we looked so alike. She was fast. There was another sprinter called Cheryl Diet, and another one called Angela Burke. Angela Burke also played netball for Trinidad. She played, I think, center and wing attack. And they came up for that games. They had a bomb team. And of course, the showdown came because everybody used to call me the Joan Porter of Grenada. And when the showdown came, man, she beat me so bad in Queen's Park. I mean, bad in those days might be bad, good 10 yards. But she beat me, 10 yards or so, but she beat me bad. She really beat me bad. And it really, you know, it opened my eyes to a lot of things and showed me how far, you know, I had to go, you know. But I'd come a long way, and but they were good. Those were the great days, actually, with Whitsuntide Sports. And I think there was a time there was Lenten games, but I don't remember much about how that came about and whatnot. In those days, athletes just made sure that they did what they had to do, which was to run. You didn't get involved in all the organization, and so you just you know, focused on getting your game done.
Okay.
Putting your game
face on. I think the name you were trying to get was Fimba Decoto.
No, Fimba Fletcher. Fimba Fletcher was a Jetsstars man. He went to PBC and he used to coach the PBC team. He helped us in the early days as a Convent team as a coach, because Convent didn't have a coach. So in getting ready for Kintercall, Fimba he coached the college team, the PBC team, and helped us to a certain extent. But he was also a part of Jetsstars.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of the greats as well.
And Clev is saying if female cricket was what it is today, I'm sure Michelle would have made West Indies as a fast pace bowler. Michelle, pick was taken from Toro's book, White Frocks and Coals Dust. Next time in Spice, I'll drop you a copy. And,
thank you.
And Toro is saying, we'll arrange to send the photo. Bass, referring to Bascom, you have to bring Ambrose, who's Ambrose Phillip, one of these days to talk about GFA.
I agree.
And when he as the general secretary and I as assistant and the rest of the executive introduce the Marcusson Premier League. Well, talking about Ambrose Phillip, he says, let me remind Michelle of Michelle's role as a fundraiser. Oh, he's actually clarifying that it was actually the visit of Vice President Bush, I think. Well, he said, because Hamlet said I think Hamlet agreed, I think it was Reagan or whatever. But he said they collaborated on a project that raised over $20,000. A lot of money.
It was a lot of money. And he was really, Ambrose couldn't believe that I had collected all that money. He just couldn't believe it. Yeah. Those were the best days, actually.
Right.
I also was another first for me was being on the Lottery Authority. I was, I think, the only woman, the first National Lottery Authority board. I was on that board.
Okay.
And the only woman on it as well. And only had to leave only when I had to travel to France to study.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Groundbreaking is Michaele Hercules. And Michaele, apart from your role as the secretary of the Badminton Association, you also had the role of president of the Grenada Netball Association for a period.
Yes, I was president. I was PRO. I was assistant something else in netball as well. But I didn't stay president. I didn't serve out the full term as president because that's when my scholarship came through. And therefore I left. I had to leave, give it up, obviously, because I traveled to France January or February of 1980. So, but I was president from sometime in 79. So I didn't serve out the full term, but I was also president. When I left, I think it was Petra McBarnett that became she was a vice president, and she took over until the end of term.
Okay, and let's talk about your role working along with the late John Diabo in the early days of what was the Olympic Association.
Why do you want to remind me of that? Oh, John was a joy to work with. I mean, he had so much grit and determination, and the Grenada Olympic Association at the time, before it became the committee. I was like John's secretary. He was the secretary of the GOA, but I did all the work for him. I did all the administrative work for John.
Because there was never an office or anything like that at the time.
There was no office. Wherever I worked, I sort of did things for John to get it done. So initially, and at some point in time, but he loved Royston Hopkins. May he rest in peace. Royston LaHaye. He so liked Royston LaHaye that he said, listen, anything I'm doing with the Olympics, I'm going to be the secretary, but Royston is my friend and he will be the president. So there wasn't even an election to have Royston on GOA. John just made him the president. But there were other people who helped John as well, like Goatee and a few others. But it was always a pleasure working with John. We struggled. There was an incident where we had to get money for the team to go away. I think it was in 1984. The games were being held where? Salt Lake City? I don't remember. Someplace, wherever it was in 84. Los Angeles?
Los Angeles, yeah. Los Angeles.
And we had to get money from abroad. And we had a little confrontation with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce at the time. But everything we did in good faith for John and helped him to get it. It's just a pity that we do not recognize him more for what he really has done to make sure that the GOC, which was then GOA, John Diabo's name should really be spelled out somewhere. I guess this is where the Hall of Fame comes in, the Sporting Hall of Fame, which we've always spoken about, Michael, having a Hall of Fame. And we really need it, because when you speak about people like John, who's moved on, he's done so much, especially for those who are in office now, that it's a real shame that his name is not, mentioned more.
Mm-hmm. Probably the building could have been named in his honor or something like that. So
there are a lot of things that
there are a lot of things.
There are a lot of things.
Okay.
I just think it's a pity.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity missed but not lost.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do with this program in terms of, getting people to share their stories, but at the same time for those to appreciate, what would have been achieved years gone by. John was a creative thinker where sports was concerned, as Tora was saying, very creative indeed. And as you said, John was the walk-in office, because there was no.
He just got people to do things. So he would say, Michelle, in his African, Michelle, you are going to be doing, this. Yeah. And I just did it, So all his mail in those days, of course, you posted everything. So everything to go abroad, he just said what he wanted done. He would give me a little draft. Of course, he expected me to fix it up, as it were, to write it properly, fix whatever was necessary and get it out. And that's what I did in the early days. Yeah.
And that was even leading up to when Grenada was accepted to the International Olympic Committee, right?
Yes, until I think I traveled and I don't know who else who took it over then, but you know, anything he wanted for the GOA in those days, I got it done. That's how it was. Ambrose and myself at one time when they became the GOC did vie for president and secretary. We tried the thing at the time, but we were beaten again by Vida and Royston. I think Vida, if she's listening, would remember that she was really mad with us. It was a close call. It was a close race. I don't know if Ambrose remember how much they beat us by, but it was very keenly contested.
No recount in those days, right?
No,
But let's go on to, you also played a part in, and I'm seeing these days where you're seeing a number of women, female, involved in track officiating. And I recall the early days in getting involved in sports. I would see the likes of Michaele Hercules, and there was also Chase.
Louisa Chase.
Yeah, being involved in track officiating.
Yeah. Before I forget, I'll come back to that. But before I forget, I also have to say in track and field that in that final, when we won Intercall in 1972, I set the record. I set a record for in the long jump. And that record stayed in place for 13 years until it was broken by Giselle Bartholomew, I think in 1985 or somewhere around there. Yeah, so 72 and 13, that's 85, yeah. So I did hold the long jump record in Intercall for 13 years. And after I became an athlete, I went straight into the official status. I started off as a track judge, and I ended up as a chief track judge. Louisa, she was also a member of Long Island Striders. Teresa Beggs, I don't know if many people, as you talk about that, Teresa Beggs, who was also
River Road.
River
Road. Yes. River Road. Say it loud and clear.
She was also in Long Island Striders. She used to do shot put and things like that, field events. And Louisa as well. So Louisa did officiating for a long time. I did at one point try to, when I saw there was an opening to have Mr. Clouden, Alvin Clouden's dad. He passed recently, a couple of years ago. He's been the chief starter for years. Himself and Charlie Francis did.
Alistair Clouden.
Alistair Clouden. He and Charlie Francis did starting for years. And as they got on in age, there was always an opening. And I always at one point wanted to be a starter. But the Sun, for medical reasons, I couldn't stay long in the Sun. So I gave that up. Although I was a member, not for long, of the Grenada Starters Association.
So you also played a role in...
I also played a role in that, but not for long.
Not for long. Okay. Let's see. John, and he's referring to John Diabo, talked a lot about National Lottery long before it came into existence. He even was thinking about ways to reintroduce horse racing in Grenada. He would travel abroad and return with all kind of equipment. That's what.
Not just equipment, but he would come back. He would get money as well for the IOC in those days. For the IOC, it was the International Olympic. It was the Grenada Olympic Association in those days. And he's right. John, I don't think, though, that people took John seriously. They just saw him as this little black African guy who didn't really command much respect, maybe in some areas. With Gary, yes, but I don't think that the rest of the business community or so would have supported John, because I guess people were so skeptical at the time, of non-Grenadians and what have you. Paranoia with all different things. So John wasn't really taken seriously, but he had a lot of ideas, and he did have, I think, the right contacts to help them. But I don't think he was taken seriously.
How would you conceptualize? What's your concept about sports and what it was then to what it is now? And you made, and I'm saying that in the context of the point you made earlier in terms of the facilities, the equipment. and comparing to what was there then to what is there now. And I always ask the question whether or not, if our folks then had, and I mean, it's sort of, biased to make that sort of comment, but if our folks had the sort of, not just facilities, but resources available to them then, what it would have been like for people like Michelle and Goldie Robinson and, the names you have been calling, in terms of where you would have gone, in terms of accomplishments for Grenada, in terms of sports development in Grenada then compared to now?
Well, I think we would have all done phenomenally. I mean, we would just have been phenomenal is not about, I mean, just hippopotamously good. I mean, if only we had, I mean, when I look back on it, at some point in time, I remember wanting to be a professional athlete. There was an opportunity for me. I don't know if it is something that would have been realized, but the same Tony Henry, my mother who lived in, okay, let me go back a little bit. My mother who lived in England most of the time was home for my graduation in 1973. And Tony Henry took the opportunity then to say to her, listen, I have friends in Trinidad who can organize a scholarship, an athletic scholarship for Michelle. And I would like your permission to be able to go ahead and to say yes, so we could go ahead with the arrangements. Because I believe it was the same university that they were sending Joan Porter to. And my mother looked at him and she said, and when she's finished studying, what is she going to do? Because she just couldn't understand where this could have taken me. It just wasn't in her DNA. So, of course, he needed to have her permission, and that fell through the roof. But it really is incomparable, the two areas, because, I remember for netball, when we traveled, we had to buy our own uniforms. We had to buy every living thing. The only thing that was paid for was our passage and the accommodation. But we had to do everything else. And we did that proudly to represent Grenada. You see people now and, they dictate the pace in terms of what they should get and what, but we were very proud to make sacrifices, to purchase stuff for us to travel to represent Grenada. And in terms of resources and facilities, well, I mean, but there's no question in my mind when I think of the athletes of my time, Oliver Lake, in terms of jumps, the high jump, the long jump, how good he was, Raymond Anthony. I mean, Yvonne Anthony, his sister, I think, was part of Long Island Striders too, and she did jumps. She was pretty good. She was a hell of a good netballer as well. The Williams sister. If we had, just the facilities with the coaching that we had, we would have done extremely well. I think Grenada would have been on the map earlier. Donald Pear, if he had an opportunity, I think would have been an Olympian. I think we would have just done great with the facilities that we have. Again, but nothing happens before it's time, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that, you're speaking about those things, and that the hope is that we'll find a way where we can document, the history of sports in Grenada. Toro, I know we had a discussion about that some time ago, Toro, and he did indicate that, that will be a very challenging task because it will involve a lot of writing, a lot of, research, interviews, the resources, the logistics involved in finding the people, and even those who would have, would have gone, the Margaret Dow and and the others. How do we get someone to share their stories? It will be a huge task. Toro, the assignment is still on Toro.
Yes, it would, because you and I, Michael, have been discussing this for God knows how long.
Yeah, quite a
In
while.
terms of documenting these things. I remember, look at Carl Drakes has been dead for so many years. And I remember Carl Drakes saying to me, Michelle, you need to come, we need to sit down so we could talk about these things. Charlie Francis used to say the same thing. All these men they've moved on. My uncle-in-law, Dr. DeVere Pitt,
Yeah,
I started. He used to be vice president of the GNC. Tony Henry's father Todd Henry was the president. Dr. Pitt, I think, was the vice president. And Charlie George was either assistant secretary to, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Tony Antwine or somebody like that. An Antwine guy who used to be the secretary, and Charlie worked with him. But for years, they used to be saying that, we need to sit down. And we say, yeah. And we keep on procrastinating on it. And, and that is why I think every generation thinks that netball started with them or track and field started with them, because there just isn't any record of anything from anybody,
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Margaret is saying, easy for those who have passed on. You tell their stories through the voices of others. Yeah, providing they would have shared their stories with others.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a project maybe that the GO, I don't know if they have the power to do that. I mean, the ability or whatever it is. But I think it is a project that the GOC could take on in terms of making sure that there is a Hall of Fame. Um, the only thing is, things like cricket is not an Olympic sport. So I don't know how that would play out. I don't know how the politics of that would play out. But somebody has to take up the mantleship for doing that. The gauntlet has been thrown many times, and we talk about it and we talk about it and we talk about it. But, time is running out on us in terms, and it could start with schools as well. You have Hall of Fame for people who win who get awards in education. How about a Hall of Fame in the schools? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
for those athletes who have gone before. I mean, we could start there, maybe
Yeah.
with secondary schools. I don't know. It's just a thought.
No, and it's a good point, because after listening to the likes of Eugene Licorice, for example, on Thursday, and what he would have achieved during his time representing the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, SAS, the great rivalry he brought in the 80s, and as you said, the schools can have something where it probably will go even way back before the likes of the same Eugene, Livingston Nelson, Trevor Baudet, and others.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing as St. Joseph Convent, PBC, GBSS,
Yeah.
McDonald College, St. David's Catholic Secondary School, which was St. David's Secondary School before, and a pretty new school
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of its history, could probably do something. So probably someone like Hamlet Mark, for example, could take on a project for the St. David's Secondary School.
Secondary school.
Yeah. And
But we need to get this home, because you could always follow up afterwards and see if there is a Hall of Fame in Convent, for example, and you had to say, well, Michaele Hercules and for track and field or netball or whatever it is. You could say whatever happened. There could be your next program. Whatever happened to so and so. In terms of, because you could follow through in terms of what happened to these people. But even at the schools, they did well. There have been outstanding athletes. I mean, in school, they didn't get far. Maybe most of them went away to study, and that was the end of that. But we've had, through all the generations, through all the years, many people who've done exceedingly well. When you think of netball, as I said, in my time, the people who inspired me in netball was Irvin. I just liked their style of play, was Over Williams and Jenny Wells. In track and field, who inspired me might have been the same Joan Porter out of Trinidad, because that's all who we knew. But but let's get something going for the different schools, and then we could move to a national Hall of Fame. At least you could have people that you could look at and say, oh, but we're not doing anything. And the kids go to school and they just don't know. They just think that everything starts today or started yesterday. Everybody thought, that athletics start with Kirani. No, there were people who paved the way for him. And Donald Pear was one of them, one of the greatest that I know, at least in my time. There might have been other people before. There are long distance runners who did particularly well. Mr. Robbie was one of them. There was a steel guy, I've forgotten his first name. There are lots of Morris Bull Williams, there's Evelyn Maitland, there was, we had a lot of people who did well.
Yep. And even, you start calling names there and it start flowing because even Raymond Anthony,
Herman Melo Peters
yeah.
was destined to be one of the greatest all-round athletes we ever had until he had the freak accident and lost his leg. But we had Sampath Harbil. I mean, the only people who will talk about Sampath is my age group. People in the late 50s maybe and beyond. Nobody else knows about these guys. There has to be a way to make sure that not just the memories linger, but the achievements of these people are recorded. And not just for athletes, for officials as well. There are people who have excelled, who've gone beyond, to make sure. I mean, people, not because Ambrose is my friend, but he did a fantastic job with GFA. I don't think there will be anybody else like him in GFA.
Yeah,
in terms of putting Grenada on the map in the days of Shell Caribbean Cup, in the days of,
administration.
Crazy, but we were so great. I mean, as a nation, we were such a great sporting nation. And as you said, the question that you asked about the resources, had we had them, yes, I think we would have done much better than this generation, actually, with the resources that they have. Yeah. Because there was commitment, Michael. There was passion. There was commitment. It's not about the money or you actually forcing people nowadays to represent Grenada. It's a shame. There's no pride. There's no patriotism. I don't know.
Well,
maybe.
George Goatee Robinson. Good afternoon to you, Goatee, and I'm certain Michelle will say good afternoon. He said, Michelle, we had mentors who shared their families with us. Yes. Time, talent, and treasure. Our generation seemingly was differently lost it along the way. That's what he's saying.
Yes, yeah. That's so true. But it was just a different vibe altogether. A different vibe. But there was so much participation. There were so many clubs. The amount of sporting clubs we had in Grenada. And I mean old as well as young. People were involved. Hanford. I mean, I just calling some of the names, the Atoms, the Dauntless, even the netball teams, Aces. I remember Joan Pivot used to have a team called Aces, if I'm not mistaken. There's QPR, who's always been there. Traditionally, Queen's Park Rangers is always there. There was Evergreen Jets Netball Club. That was the Brewster's Club. That Joan St. Bernard, again, did that with Mr. Brewster. Huggins had a very good netball team, Huggins United. There were so many teams and so much willingness. I mean, people were lining up to be a part of, there was the team that Jennifer played for that team. Oh God, it's not coming to mind now. The netball team, herself and Jeanette Decote Falcons, I think it was. There was so much interest in sport. We were young, we were enthusiastic, we were driven, we had passion, we wanted to be a part of something, and people did something. If it wasn't track and field, it was netball. You didn't have to beg anybody. People lined up to be a part of it. I don't get that. Parents not even pushing their kids anymore. I mean, children go to school and you have parents making excuses why the child should not even be a part of the sports in the park. They should stay. This is ridiculous. But it is what it is.
We can continue talking about that for quite a while. But Margaret is saying, just listening to Michelle today brought back memories of so many people that I had totally forgotten. And I told her that, Michelle. She also said about white labels was another netball.
White labels.
White label. Yeah. And Vida is saying that the Olympic education arm can help with documenting the Olympic Academy, and the museum can also facilitate these things. I'm sure that we can find someone who would like to write the history of these sports. She also is saying that PYO from Grand Dance with Nautica and Ray.
Correct. I'd forgotten. Where's YMCA too? I mean, I remember how all timers, our team got started with netball, and there was this enthusiasm. It's all high school girls who used to play. They got together to form a team. The same Irva Williams, Marcel Lewis, Cornelia Dells, they all Jenny Wells, Woodruff. They all got together and said, "Oh, we need to continue And of course, then people started going away. So they extended the invitation to former convent girls, and we joined and we became all-timers. But I stopped playing netball at 55, only when I tore my Achilles. That's when I stopped.
With all-timers?
Active.
With all-timers?
All-timers netball club.
Right.
You know, but we all were old people. Jenny, we were all old people. I mean, we used to go out in the outer parishes to play. And the people coming in to see the games, we playing teenagers, 17, 18 years old. And most of us were already in our 40s, 50s. And they would laugh at us and say, look at these old people coming to play. And Jenny grade very early. So everybody said, look, Tanti, look, Nenen coming to play against y'all and beating y'all. You know, but people played. People were active. People, as I said, we were so driven. We so wanted to be a part of that we continued long after. You know, I see netball tournaments, happening, and it always disgusted me that every time the opening of a tournament, you very rarely had a past president there, for example. Nobody invited anybody. You know, it was just them, as if netball started today or yesterday. How many people know that Margaret Nichols was a former past president? Jenny, Pauline LaHaye, Yolan Wells. How Monica Joseph, now deceased, she was a judge. Joan, excuse me, Joan St. Bernard. I'm getting passionate now, that's why.
No, I think you were referring to Margaret Dow.
No, Margaret Nichols. Margaret Dow may have been a president too.
President.
Margaret Nichols.
She was also a president.
The former president of the Senate was also a president of the Netball Association.
Oh, Judge Monica Joseph. Yeah. Okay.
Judge Monica Joseph was a president. Franca Alexis was a president. You know, how many people know that? The young netballers don't. They don't know their history. How many of them know who are national players? Excuse me. How many of them know who represented Grenada in the only netball tournament, world netball team we had? They don't. They don't know their history. And it's the same for the other sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, we need to do better, because it's these people who will come on to help and make sure that the game progresses and develops in a way. It gives them something to do. It gives us. I'm not just talking for netball and track and field. I'm talking for other sports as well. It gives you something to do. It helps you get involved, and you make sure that the sport continues, and you could be a mentor to other people as well. But they cut you off as if, they don't mention you, they don't say anything, and the sport dies with them. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well, Tora was actually saying that even before we get to a macro project like documenting the exploits of national athletes, schools and clubs must begin now to document their achievements, have someone dedicated to taking photos, taking videos, writing and securing clips from newspapers, and save them at some place at the club and school. Even today, the GOC has trouble with national associations when it comes to doing the sportsman and sportswoman of the year. Too many clubs submit names and they have no documented material. And that I know that for a fact in terms of the Olympic Committee, when they have to, do the annual sportsman and sportswoman, the difficulty they have in terms of getting the information from even national associations, and sometimes even after pleading and begging and requesting, then you'll probably just get a one-liner on someone from an association who you're nominating. And no information about this person, what they would have achieved to be the example, and I'm just using an example, probably the footballer or the cricketer of the year. It's only of recent we see some associations take it very seriously to do some in-depth analysis of their nominees in terms of providing information, so that when you're doing the selection, it's based on the achievement of that person for the year. So it's a point you're making there, and it's very important that we have to start, as you say, from the school, probably not have to, but probably from the schools, from the clubs. And talking about clubs, Michelle, I want to hear what your take on clubs, because it appears that during your time in the 60s, 70s, and even in the 80s, there was a lot of clubs were in existence, not so
A
much
lot of
teams,
clubs. A
but
lot of clubs.
club sports was something big in Grenada during those times.
Yes, as I said, I think the Jetstar Sports. I mean, the people in track in the GA as it was then, the GAA now, but the GNC, Goat, you might remember. But we had so many clubs, and it wasn't just clubs with 5 or 10 people. Participation was high. You know, there was a police club, there was PBC, there was, as I said, there was 100, there was Atoms, there was Dauntless, there was St. John Sports, there was Hurricane, there was, you name it, we had clubs. I remember for Whitsuntide Games, you had as many as 16 countries coming to Grenada, Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad. This was a big thing. You know, now we actually, and that was just long before Carifta, long before anything else. But I don't know. You can't even get too many young people. It's just a selected few who are willing to go the extra mile. You know, I don't know how we do it, but I don't know what happened along the way. And you would think it would have been better because our facilities started improving. We started getting stadia. We now have 2 stadia. I mean, but what are we doing? Kirani James, and then what?
Mm-hmm. Well,
I mean, I'm not saying they're not other good athletes.
yeah.
I don't follow it as much, no.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is the resources are there, but I think it needs a lot. It calls for maybe something new. Parents, the schools, the church, everybody. It takes a village.
Ambrose Phillip is saying there are more and better fields or pitches everywhere, but sport disciplines are less played in bracket and worse technically.
I agree. What Roy St. John said, it's 99% intelligence and 10% skill. So we just don't have the athletes with that IQ, and worse, somebody, because you used to play the sport doesn't automatically make you a coach. So technically we just don't have the people with the sense. I mean, I don't want to offend anybody, but it doesn't mean that you automatically get to be a coach because you played.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know. I mean, I might be. That doesn't mean I should be a coach.
Yeah,
if that's the case. But I'm not a coach. I don't have the technical skills to be a coach.
You could have played and probably be the worst player.
Yes.
Margaret Francis says, I think it's a reflection of a bigger problem in the society. That is how we regard and treat our seniors. Once someone passes a certain age in Grenada, the trend is to put them out to pasture, and that's the end of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is so true. That is so true. So somebody it has to start somewhere. My profile message is this, and it has stemmed from, me being in sports. The leader of the speed of the race is determined by the leader of the pack. So somebody there in leading position has to be able to come forward and say, listen, let us start. Let us make it worthwhile. Let us see what we could do. Is not just, when once, I mean, few people would mention Ambrose's name now in football. Few people will mention, well, I have long gone down the drain. But I mean, I'm talking about others. Who knows about that? There has to be some way to make sure that administrators, that athletes, that officials, whoever, we get a way to always recognize these people. And we could do it in very simple ways. Convent has some sports in the park, or GBSS or Intercall. Bring back the people who've been record breakers. It's not going to cost you that much. Once people feel recognized, once they feel that, they've been given some sort of recognition, they're willing to help. They don't charge you anything. They do it for free. They just recognition. It's like customer service, actually. You walk into a store and you remember, oh, Mr. Bascom, good to see you today. The mere fact that the clerk remembers your name after 1 or 2 visits, that in itself makes you want to come again. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same thing, that you really try to encourage and involve people. They will help and give you whatever assistance. Nobody's looking for no trips abroad. Nobody's looking for money. You're just looking for involvement, because the game, the sport the discipline that you had a passion for, you want to see it continue in that vein. So, stop. It's too much about the messenger and less about the message.
Yeah, I agree with that because I recall while I was doing some studies at the BBC some years ago, and I hooked up with Jason Roberts, and
Yes.
West Bromwich Albion was playing, and he organized for me to go to the game, to attend the game. So I was able to get the train from London, rode the train, everything like that. So, and when I got there, the courtesies that was extended, and then I was introduced to a number of folks that was there, and what they were actually telling me is that some of them are actually past players, and some of those guys are in the 80s. And whenever the team is playing, there is actually a spot for these guys in their stadium for them.
Yes.
They are given that courtesy to be, in this, and that's, well, obviously, it's probably now with COVID, it might be different, but it's what, and I understand most of the clubs in Premier League teams, rather, not just the Premier League. Sorry, I understand some of the other divisions too. They have this arrangement with the former um, footballers, the veterans, the ex-footballers, where they extend the courtesy where they get season tickets, and they extended the courtesy where they sit,
Yeah.
and at times get to speak with the current players, as mentors,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so it's a good point you're making. But the let
Yeah,
me
but we see it all the time too on TV. I mean, you take a tennis tournament, for example, and there's going to be Wimbledon, whatever it is, the Australian Open, and you recognize that maybe a record will be broken or something like that. And you say, okay, Federer is going to most likely win his sixth Wimbledon, and which would break Bjorn Borg's record, for example. So you bring Bjorn Borg in because it's you know it's going to be an awesome moment, when this is done. If Federer is able to, to get past that and win his sixth championship, break a record. We see it all the time. You look at if it's Agassi's record about to be broken, whoever it is. Once it's something that impacts a past player, you will see that they bring them in, they invite them to the game, they invite former presidents, they recognize the people who have contributed to the sport to the point where it is where it is now.
oh,
And that isn't hard for us to do. As I said, these people contribute in some way or another. And it's not a question of money. It's not a question of trips. It's not a question of anything else. It's just a question of getting people to be involved to make sure that the sport maintains its values, be a mentor to the younger people. You know how many times we have problems with teams going away, they don't know how to dress properly, they go with all of these things become very important. And you can involve, some of the older players with that, or older officials.
yeah. Well,
You know, there are
I,
people who have a lot to offer.
and Margaret is saying,
How to
that
conduct yourself.
there is something called the senior games. Yeah, I know about the senior games in Barbados.
Yes.
I have a Bajan friend from college in his 70s who participates every year. They are held many countries around the world. Maybe that is something Grenada can look into to keep these people engaged. Yeah, the senior games is
But I don't think, Margaret, that the problem is so much the senior games. I think those things would happen. We had teams and what have you, as I said, that we played for all timers. As I said, I'm sure they had it with football as well and other disciplines. But I can only speak about the sports that I play, or I used to play, and they had it. I think that for me, the bigger issue is the transition. Is from the old into the new, is getting people involved with helping with, so the history goes on, as opposed to just finding a game just to keep. It's not a question of senior people being active. I think that happens. There's a lot of senior people who play at different sports, whether it's dominoes, whether it's whatever it is, but they're being active, they're doing something, you know. But I think it's how do you get to to um, to maintain that, to have that history. How do you sustain? How do you keep a record of it? How do you keep it in people's face, as it were, in terms of what people did? I think that for me is the bigger picture in making sure that the people who really should be recognized, and there are a lot of people in different disciplines. I'm not going to call any names. There are a lot of, I don't want to offend anybody by leaving anybody out, but there are a lot of people in the different disciplines. I think we need to do much more. We need to do much better than we're doing now in terms of making sure that their place is down in history.
Okay. Putting on your thinking cap, Michelle, what would you want to see improve in the short term regarding sports development in Grenada?
You're not going to like this answer, but I've not really been involved too much in recent years. To me, I myself lost interest. I'll be very honest with you, Michael. You had really had to persuade me. I didn't even think sport anymore. I would, netball, I would like to see come back the way, I mean, at least close to what we had. I think the only way we could do that is, try not to have too many players maybe on the netball team, on the netball executive players on the executive. We really do need to get some really serious and hardworking people in there. There are people who have given a lot of their time and effort, and you're not seeing the results that you would want to. I don't know. There has to be, I am not thinking really, I didn't really think of it in the short term. Because everything is so much driven on incentives, it seems as if we have to pay athletes now to be interested, in terms of sports development. I don't hear anything too much about the Ministry of Sport. I mean, when Vida and Conrad were there as coordinators, there were a lot of things, but the truth is I have not kept pace with it because there doesn't seem to be much action happening apart from when Wagiti does a competition in football or something like that. I really don't know, because everything is so driven now by money and I don't know. Things have changed. Times have changed. I'm sorry I can't really give you an answer in terms of short-term development, and I think it's more so driven now because there's COVID and people are just, limited in terms of what you could do.
Yeah.
I am not really sure myself because I'm not up to breast with what up to date with what the IOC does or with the GOC does and what other associations are doing to motivate to say I could critique or I could add, some sort of contribution. But I do know that there is not as much impact as there used to be a few years ago. I do know, there are a few outstanding athletes in the disciplines nowadays, but I don't follow the sport too much nowadays in terms of what, because there is nothing to encourage you to do so.
Okay. Well, Ambrose is saying...
I'm sorry, I can't answer that in terms of the short-term thing. I really don't know. We haven't gotten anywhere with badminton. We talk, we want about it. We don't have a hope. What are we doing with football? Since the days of, and I'm sorry to say this is not because I worked for Shell, but since the days of Shell Corrigan, this steady decline. It's like you look at them, they've done well, they do well here, and they're not consistent. So I don't know what the policies are. I don't know what's in place. I haven't followed it. If a team is playing, I go to the park. I don't go anymore because you don't get that, the result you're looking for, not only in terms of winning the game, but in terms of the quality that you're seeing on the field. And as Ambrose said, technically we found one thing. So it's not that there is a desire. You don't really know what to do. What do we do? Is it because we don't have enough money in sport to inject maybe overseas coaches to do things? I really don't know because I have not been following it. But what I do know is that it doesn't excite me in terms of what is happening now.
Okay. Well, you're getting some assistance because Ambrose is actually saying the answer is structure, incentives, and the rest follow structure. Ambrose like his technical terms.
Yes, but it is.
but Bob Simpson is sort of putting you on notice.
On the spot?
Maybe it's an opportunity for you to serve again. Are you interested?
I'm always interested. Of course, but Barbara, I agree with. She's really put me in a spot, huh? I'm always interested, but it's the commitment. It always comes down to the commitment of the rest of the team, and that's when it gets frustrating. When it becomes, after a while, a one man's, or two persons, and you can't get the others to commit as well. So I think if we can get a team of committed people, yes, I'd be interested.
Okay. Well, she's reminding you also that there is the senior over 50 component of the Peter David Margaret Dow Netball Tournament. I'm proud to see that I was part of the very first tournament as the master of ceremony. But no, yeah, there's this. Yeah, I play my part, and it's something that I support. Well, let I say support. I like to feature the results and things like that. So, and it's something that has been going on year after year. That Margaret Dow Peter David Netball Tournament. So she's saying that is something probably you can get involved. But clever.
But let me also take the opportunity to thank Barbara too for her long-standing service. I really did want to mention her name. There are a lot of people names, of course, that you couldn't think. I mean, Eleanor Pilgrim, who's been a stalwart, as everybody knows. Barbara herself has been there with QPR and the national team, training, coaching, involvement in administration. They're people who die-hard people. They're one of a kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jennifer Woodruff is an all-time fan supporter. She doesn't play anymore, but she always there making noise. There are people who would be there, but and as I said, Babs really, has done tremendous. I mean, she has stuck with it through good, bad, and indifferent. But as she also knows, it's very difficult. I mean, she carries most of that burden on her shoulders all of the time. It's not easy. And to get a team of people, to get a team that people would respect and all of that, it's very, very difficult. So, I want to give, as we would say, big up Babs for the contribution that she has made. She's done tremendously well. I don't think most people would have had the stickability that she had.
Yeah. And we will hear from Babs sometime in the coming weeks, hopefully. And Clever saying the integration of pan music, specifically harps, he has to inject harps, was always a part of sporting events, a marriage of convenience between sports culture minus the domestic violence and neglect so prevalent today in both. And in those days, pan music was the entertainment, was the DJ at sporting events. Yeah. Pan music was the DJ at sporting events,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me see if there is any. Yeah, there's a couple. Yes. I was just saying, great. That is one of passion.
I think Babs is taking me very seriously.
Michelle,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm seeing Goti's comment. Let's call a spade a spade. Are you trying to say I'm being diplomatic? Maybe I am. But it is. It's and Goti, I think, would agree with Ambrose's comment too about structure and the lack of good technical people in place. I think people, a lot of people are there not because they have the. I don't want to question people's ability too much, but. Okay, good. It's hard for me to call a spade now. That would be politically incorrect.
But talking about the pan, you recognize this?
Oh yes, that's SJC playing at the Regal Cinema. No, sorry, SJC playing at St. Joseph's Convent. That was our first pan performance. That's me in the front there at the playing the double seconds. And that was our first performance after the guys trained us, and we performed at the convent, and it was just, I mean, the ratings were so high. They were, Trump would have been pleased.
And that would have been in the 70s?
That was in the 70s, 1970, I think, 71, somewhere around there.
Wow.
50 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yes. Well, you weren't even born yet back then.
So Michelle,
Yeah.
as she says, sorry for not being able to get. I know it took a while for you to think. I wanted you to put out your thinking cap, but as you said, the pandemic itself now would have probably creating these challenges and thing that in terms
It
of
is.
what it is that could be done and I specifically look at the short term because it's almost as if sports have to get a restart. you know
Yep.
and not just in Grenada, probably in the Caribbean, a sort of restart to get things going once again. And I'm hoping that the administrators on one side and the sportsmen and women on the other side will probably.
Don't forget the fans. Don't forget the fans.
Well, yeah, but
Because don't forget,
I'm
in
saying,
my day, I mean, when a football game was being played in the old Queen's Park, the guys, it was good all around. You had good structure, you had good teams, you had good technical people, in terms of your coaching staff and in all disciplines. And the fans came out in full voltage. I mean, I remember Ratty with his trumpet in the stadium, and the fans were just incredible. People came out in large numbers to support. We represented in Windward Islands, we represented regionally. So we just have to find a way to get back there. And thanks, Ambrose, but I do agree a lot of it has to do with structure and the people's commitment to want to take the sport. You have to have a passion, be it as an official, be it as an administrator, be it as a player. But you have to have some sort of passion to go forward. And I don't think that's there anymore. People are in it for the money and what the trips and what they could get out of it. I mean, it's that's what it is. Are you there?
yes, I am. I am
Did
there.
I say something out of turn?
No. I was just looking to see if there were any further comments that I can post, but I see something about commentators and Angel Hearts for the bands for the March part. Yeah, that is what I was actually looking at there.
Yes.
Yeah, March past St. Joseph Convent and the Anglican High School for years. They were using
Yes.
the
Yeah.
the the, um, the steel bands. There wasn't anything as the DJ in those days. Okay, you have to,
No. No.
yeah, you have to march to the steel band, and then when it's time for entertainment, whatever, the steel band gets its time to play as well. Okay, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is what I was looking for. Now it's all about a big DJ and a big party, as they would say
That's right.
in
That's
sports,
right.
and seemingly a distraction to an extent, seemingly a distraction to an extent. But let's see how we can go now to what it is. There's something else I wanted to talk to you. Oh, I wanted you to some names. I know you said you're not good on names. You did mention the likes of Hazel Bezinski, and at times I think you said Jenny and Jenny Wells, but it's Jenny Woodruff. I think is
Jenny
it
Woodruff. Well, Jenny,
right? Yeah.
I say Wells because I'm thinking that the people who looking in
Mm.
um, are going to be people who remember as Wells. So I say Wells Woodruff.
Right.
Jenny Wells Woodruff. Yes. So people who don't remember the married name would know who we're talking about.
Yeah. But who
And
was?
I say,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm trying to find
I
out.
only speak about Hazel because Hazel and I have done everything together from the
Mhm.
time we were about 7 years. When I say so, in sport. We were part of Jones Club as young children, 7, 8 years. We played when we both went to convent. We did everything together. Hazel was head girl at the school. I was deputy head girl. I was the sports captain. She was a deputy. We played netball together. We played track and field together. We did that throughout all our lives until we represented Grenada together. So we know in business together. We Hazel and I have really. So I call Hazel name because when I forget, I would say, Hazel, you remember? And she, of course, has a very good memory. So she would just, fill in the blanks or give more than what I have. But I only say Hazel because we've done most of our sport. When the National Students Council was formed in 1972, when, with this thing in Grenada with New Jewel and what have you, and all the demonstrations, the student demonstrations. Hazel and I represented Convent in the new students in the National Students Council. So we've more or less done our lives, together. Our children, our friends, we kind of.
So you had a bit of quote unquote politics.
I had a little bit of politics,
yeah.
to the point that when I went to England to study, I remember being so militant because from the time I got into England, I remember the Conservative government was in power, and we were fighting for student grants, and I went into England, and when I got into college, and I got hooked up very early, and and was down at the West End in London and demonstrating to get rid of Thatcher and improve things for student grants and what have you. So I had a little bit of militancy in me as well.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're saying, I think the athletes have to take some more personal responsibility to it. Just seems to me that athletes don't put in as much individual and personal training as before, whether they're involved in football, cricket, netball, or basketball. And it's something we have been saying,
which is worrying, because you really have to want it, and more importantly, you have all these you have TV now, everybody has cable, and everybody, you see how hard these guys work. I mean, from Michael Jordan to Kobe to LeBron to whoever in basketball. You see how Ronaldo and Messi and how hard they work in football. You see in cricket how hard, that the English guys in Australia work. You see it in all the disciplines, how hard they work to get there. So you would have thought that just by seeing that, because you have the access to cable and other things, you have, all the other forms of social media, to see how people get there, that they would want to be able to be encouraged. We didn't have anything to go by, but to listen to stories from people, word of mouth, when we could get it, or just being motivated ourselves. So the mind boggles, because when you see how far you could get, now, especially in terms of the rewards, the financial rewards from working hard in sport, I'm surprised that not many people are willing to take it on and try to achieve more.
Mm-hmm. So, but don't you think there is something additionally missing? I mean, yes, there is the personal responsibility, as we have been advocating time and time again. But is there something? It may be yes, it may be no. That it's not. It's not.
I don't know. I don't know what government's position is on sports as well. I remember, in the 70s, Gary was a sportsman and he liked to win. And so when we came back, he always had a party. He called us heroes. Every time a team went away and came back, Gary celebrated. You see, the speed of the race is determined by the leader of the pack. So if there is no motivation from the top, what do I care? I suppose athletes don't really, what do I care? I just go and I pull a muscle, I get damaged, nobody looks at me, when I come back, you have to fight up with whoever the body is to get help, to get treatment, to get therapy, to get what have you. I don't know. I really don't know, but they're obviously, as I said, I keep on saying it all the time. The speed of the race is determined by the lead of the pack.
Okay. And then Ambrose is saying West Indian cricketers working in secret. Ambrose always with some sort of technical. Yeah, and I understand that one. And Goti, in our day, it was love for school, community, and country. And
I remember, and I agree again. As a child growing up in school, I would attest to that. The first, you always love. I pledged. We were part of the 4-Hers. We were 4-Hers. And 4-Hers is like a social club. I was a 4-Her. I pledged my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to better service, and my health to better living for my club, my community, and my country. That's what I grew up on.
Interesting. Wow.
That's what I grew up on. And I've never forgotten it. My children are always amazed. Mom, how do you remember those things? I have never forgotten it as a 6-year-old. I pledge my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to better service, and my health to better living for my club, my community, and my country. So yes, Goti, I agree with you 100%. Because don't forget, in our day, we didn't know anything about, we didn't have dirty drains. We were trained to clean your house in front of you and on the other side of the road. That's what we knew. That's what we grew up with. And that extended to our lives. You know, be it sport, be it academic, be it whatever, health, everything. That's what it was. Your club, your community, your country.
And you know, it's interesting you saying all of that, you know, because I'm still trying to figure out what it was like. Well, not what was the thinking. I mean, back in those days, 60s, 70s in particular, that even with the you know, the lack of, and I'm saying not just facilities, but the lack of whatever it is, you know, in some cases, electricity, water, you know, all these sort of things, lack of, that folks like you and others were able to represent your country, well, your school, your community, your country, and excel at the same time, and even in academics as well, you know. And then you had situation where of recent they were contemplating whether sports affecting the academics of others, and you know, and these sort of things, you know. But somehow it was done back then in the 60s and 70s, even with less, you know.
Yeah, but I think there was also a thing too. There was also a thing in school that we learned, which was civics, and that sort of, I think, helped in some way in the overall development too, because it taught you everything. And I think we were able to combine the school, the home, the parents were more, I think, maybe more I want to think more involved. Um, um, in a way that you really wanted to excel. There was an expectation, I guess, to succeed without having to say so. You knew what you had to do. It's like somebody was saying to me a couple of days ago, what are you fussing about? It's raining. In our days when we were small, that was the time when it rained, you curled up in your bed and you got a good book and you started reading. Nowadays, you know, it was the things that moved us, that motivate us, that, again, things that you saw, that you learned without having to be taught. It took a village all the time. As I say, just as people say, it takes a village to bring up a child. We just knew what we had to do. We learned from our elders, and we wanted to achieve. Everybody always wanted to do the best that they could possibly do without having to be soldiered into doing it. And I think it was just the way of life. It was just the upbringing we had, and that motivated us to the point where we wanted to excel. I don't know. I didn't come from a privileged family. We were comfortable, but you always know that you wanted to do better. And your parents, although they were not saying to you, you need to get up and do it, but just the way you were brought up meant that you were expected to do well. And we had everything. In the convent, you had, today I had Legion of Mary, to, you know, just by these extracurricular activities at school, it helped you to be a better person overall. You know, there was always an extracurricular activity. There was guides, there was rangers, there was the choir, there was sports, there was the Legion of Mary, where you also, people would laugh at it, but you got an opportunity to go to the hospital and help people, and that brought out the best in you. Or you go to people's homes to help them. It was part of your task. You know, the elderly, to visit the sick and elderly and help them do chores, do some, you know, whatever needed to be done. You know, that is how we were brought up, all wrong. So I don't know if that's part of it. Nowadays, children have too many choices. They speak to their parents in a way that, you know, I don't know, you know, they dictate the pace. So you know, you're laughing, but it's true. You know, I remember going into Foodland a couple, maybe about 2 years ago, into the supermarket, and there was this lady came in with a young child. Child must have been about 3, 4 year old, 4 years. She just picked him up from school. There weren't many people in the supermarket, and he came in crying, you know, and Mommy, I want this, and he was asking for stuff, and she was trying to quieten him and say to him, you know, you can't have this or you can't have that. And of course he wasn't giving up. And eventually, when she must have told him to stop, we just heard this loud thing from this child, and you bitch, you know, and the whole, Michael, I'm not lying, the whole supermarket froze, because I think everybody in there knew that if it were that age, the slap we would have gotten across. So everybody's there waiting for the slap. Eh? It never came. And she very hurriedly took the child out and went out. But you know, that is where we are now. You know, so you know the kids determine the pace. So I don't know. It more looks as if the parents are expected to live up to the children's expectations than the other way around.
Okay. Torres saying in 1978, Carnage United lost a GFA football final 1-0 to Hurricane. Some Carnage fellas were so depressed at the loss, they walk around the wharf all evening, unable to go home and shower.
When Ambrose comes on to the program, we all can have a discussion about that.
Without prejudice, I have no reservation in saying that for the past 3 or 4 decades, sports administrators, most of whom did not play sports, no knowledge of Grenada's past experience. And I wonder if any of the sisters ever tried to recruit Michelle into becoming a nun.
No, No, Hazel was almost a nun, not me. I always gave trouble. In inverted commas.
In inverted commas. Okay. And
they tried to recruit Hazel, but not me.
Okay. And obviously
they prayed on my head too every Monday morning in the church, in the parlor.
Margaret is backing up what you said there. I would have lost every.
Yes, you have lost every tooth in your mouth.
Yeah, and it's probably what you're saying in terms of even how sports is being affected, in terms of they being part of the process. They're not getting involved. They're not, you know, as you say, they're dictating the pace. So whereas it was almost compulsory for you to be involved in sports during your time, and even if you know, there isn't a command or marching orders from your parents, you want to get involved. These days, if a parent
I lived with my grandmother, as I told you, at a very early age. I was brought up by my grandmother. She was, in her opinion, her thing was, so long as you are in school and you're there with the nuns, she figured I was safe and I was doing stuff. Every race that I ran and I won a prize, I brought it home for my grandmother. And she used to be so thrilled at the thought. And I mean, without saying I encourage you to go out, I was out there again because she was pleased with what I was doing. You know, I don't know. I just find kids just have...
And for those...
It's a different time.
And for those who joined us late, just to recap again, when you say you grew up with your grandmother and you're talking about Petite Esperance in St. David, eh?
No, I'm talking about Providence.
Providence in, Providence.
Petite Etang, which is way past Ashenden Cocoa Station.
Okay.
Ashenden Propagation Station. Petite Etang.
So
I had to run. Yes, Michael, I had to run to avoid the larger bless in the bamboo.
That was, I guess, that was way up. So no, it brings home the point.
And the Jumbie in Providence.
Mm-hmm, okay.
In Providence, cocoa. It was full of cocoa. Providence was only cocoa. So it was always very dark and scary. So it is the Jumbie in Providence and the larger bless in the bamboo in Ashenden.
Okay. Miss Michelle was a steel pan player of the first girls steel orchestra. Yeah, I mean, the steels, we did get through with that one. Yes, she not every tooth, Margaret.
Every teeth.
Yes, say that. That means all would have been out. All would have been out. What we need is a gallery, not a pop-up room that can speak of the past, remembering those of the past, so we can appreciate and apply deterrence to avoid the pitfalls of today. Michelle, your manuscript was on display this evening. Pen it. I have a title: How Michael Became Michelle the Athlete. Yes. I love that one. As Harold said, all these As a matter of fact, you know, when I sent out the promo and I pronounced as Michelle. I remember Cecil Belford, aka Flying Turkey, said, "You sure you didn't make a mistake? You made a mistake in terms of spelling of a name." I said, "No, that's the correct spelling of a name." And he said, "You sure about that?" I said, "Yes." You know, he said, "Well, this is news to me. First time I'm hearing that." You know, so I guess as much is not just Harold. There was, Flying Turkey, even Clev and others probably knowing for the first time that your name actually was spelled. Well, you basically was called
Yeah.
Michael.
But I think I should know how to spell my name. But as I said, I always answered to Michelle, and that was mainly because the nuns insisted that I couldn't enter the convent with a boy's name. So they started calling me Michelle.
Wow. Yep.
Yeah, so,
Interesting enough.
somebody was just saying something about the
Oh, playing netball, I
Hannah.
admire her as an umpire back then. She took command of the game. That's Hannah Plenty. I know Hannah
Yeah.
played netball. And she said, yeah, and Lincoln Deputy in truth. Well, so netball, basketball, football, badminton, track and field, academics, and also civic education.
Yeah,
Yeah, quite a bit
quite
accomplished.
a bit.
Yeah. So as we get ready to wrap up, Michelle,
Yeah.
it has been a pleasure chatting with you, and probably some parting words from you, obviously, to not just the current sportsmen and women, and also those those who have prospects, but those who would have blazed the track before. And I always say when I say blaze the track, I'm talking not just track and field, but whatever sporting discipline. Um, in terms of the involvement, I know it has been, um, it took a lot of persuasion to get you to talk, just as how took a lot to get, what's his name, Eugene Licorice, to speak for the first time since 1994, 95, as you said, Michelle, you probably did a little comments for Intercall some years ago, but in terms of sitting down and discussing and sharing the stories, everything, it's probably your first time. But the message we're trying to get out is that something must be done, and not just to document, and document is part of the process, so it's a process, but also to recognize those who would have excelled and representing Grenada, and not just Grenada, but probably even at as you say, the school and the community level. And it's probably a challenge for clubs, schools, and probably on the national level to start recognizing those who would have excelled years gone by.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as I said, Michael, we've spoken about it many a time and wondered how it could have been done. I think maybe some sort of committee or commission, we have to get somebody would have to be approached. I don't know who, I don't know who's willing. We're very good about talking about things, and we have great ideas when we're on TV and the world is looking, and everybody feels, they're feeling good about themselves. But when it comes for action, as I said, very few are prepared to take that step forward in terms of moving it to where it wants to be. I don't know. Again, it calls for a certain amount of commitment. It most likely would rest in the hands of a few people. It would boil down to that. But we got to start somewhere. And maybe you seem to be able. You obviously have mastered the art of persuasion. Should be able to maybe get a few people together in different. Yeah, a lot of different era. What are different eras, different disciplines, and who are willing to make the sacrifice to come together without fear or favor, without any bias to anybody, without any personal grudges or what have you. People who are definitely willing to do this so that our history could be recorded. I had given up, quite frankly, in terms of that. I mean, as you said, it took a lot to really get me here. At the end of the day, when we finished here, nobody's still going to remember Licorice what he said last week, how great, no matter how great he was or anybody else who coming on the program, nobody remembers how much Walter St. John did apart from when he spoke. By the time the interview or the discussion is over, people move on with their lives, you know, in terms of, and he did a lot with football and, you know, all the others that I know. Todd Henry might have done a lot with athletics. Ambrose would have done a lot with football. How many people remember Stanislaus maybe was president of the association? And I'm just talking about a few others. Royston, well, Royston is still in the GOC, but I'm just talking from in my time. You know, nobody remembers that. We good at talking about it, but getting down to the nitty gritty, it's a very few people, very, very few people will commit to taking it further than it is. And we need to get it done. I think there is a saying about a people with no history, but it's not all about the education. And I think we just need to get something going. I mean, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about, I really don't like talking about myself in that regard. But, you know, I'm very fortunate to have been born at a time, and I tell my children that all the time. I'm still happy to be born when I was born. I was able to accomplish a lot. I think I made it to the top level in the sports that I took part in. And I'm very pleased with what I've done. But, you know, and it paved the way for others. It really did in terms of women in sport. But who's going to remember that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so unless we really could get a few people who are willing to go through it, and the funding is important. And to try to be as objective as possible in making sure that some people, there's so many names that I can think about in all the disciplines who have a right to be recognized forever, you know, etched in history,
Right.
as we would say, indelibly branded. But who's going to start it and see through to the end that it happens? Is government going to commit to help? Is the GLC going to try? I think Vida made some comment about funding. I'm not sure how much they could do. But who else? Is there somebody we could approach? Look at when, what's his name? Hugh Dorland had opened a cricket, whatever it was, museum.
Right.
That wasn't hard to do. I mean, well, it was hard because he worked hard in getting his pieces together. But it was such a wonderful project that could have been extended to other disciplines. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah. So as we get ready,
we have the talent, we have the ability. I don't think there is the passion, the enthusiasm, the drive, the willingness to go forward, because we've been so petty with people over things, you know. When I still see the pettiness sometimes with athletics in terms of, you know, former officials and things like that, and nonsense, keeping people out, not because they don't have the ability, because you don't like them, or because you're scared of them, or, you know, in different disciplines. And I could say, you know, for netball, for GFA, for everything, you know, that's just nonsense. You know, we just need to know what the common good is and the common goal and just work towards it. But, you know, how much of a threat could I be at my age, in almost 70 years?
Well, when I asked you,
how much of a threat could Ambrose? How much of a threat?
Well,
so many people do. I mean, come on.
Well, when I asked you about the short term, that could be probably the short term. We could fix that, but I'm not.
Michael, we've said that short term so much. That short term, don't forget, because you and I, don't forget now, you and I have been speaking about this for over 10 years.
Yeah, quite a while now, I must say.
Yes.
Yeah, it could be more than 10.
So the short term has now become so long term, it's about to be extinct.
Yeah, it has. But Gotti is saying something there. I sure you take him up after the program. She said,
a beautiful tomboy. I was.
Yeah, it's a beautiful tomboy. And Toro, well, that is a question for you. So who is the roughest, toughest local netballer Michelle ever played against?
I mean, locally, it would have to be... maybe Anne-Marie Louison, and when she marked me as a defender. I've always been lucky to be playing with the toughest. But if anybody had to defend me that I really had trouble with, it might have been Anne-Marie Louison. Her younger sister, Sherry Ann, was much, 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 much younger than me. So I didn't play much against Sherry Ann. But if I did have to, I would have had a rough time with Sherry Ann Louison. And regionally, that would have been Martha Bissett from St. Lucia. Yeah. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
All right. Robert Samuel. Good afternoon to you, Robert. He's saying, thank you, Grenada Sports. I really enjoyed this interview. Miss Hercules has been my neighbor for over 30 years, and I didn't know half of her accomplishments. She's a treasure chest of sporting history. Well done. What I told you, Michelle. So even your neighbors, were not aware of what you had achieved over these years.
Well, poor Robert, he's in his 30s. No, he would have known if there was something.
Well,
if it was recorded somewhere.
Somewhere.
And that's the point. They just don't know.
Yeah.
And nobody bothers anymore, quite frankly. They just deal with who they know. You know? It's who's right there. They don't do any investigative journalism. They don't in sportive, they don't do that. They just deal with what's happening in the now.
Yeah, well, that's how we're hoping to at least bring folks like you and others out so that you can share. I hope you can speak to your.
But your program, is doing that very well. I'm hoping that depending on when you said you plan to have people like Ambrose in and other officials and when we start having a conversation going, coming out of all of these discussions, we can say, but these are some of the highlights from it, and maybe this is what we could get to do. So if I'm talking to more people, maybe you get some more ideas. I don't think I was very helpful in terms of ideas. I came on to discuss what I did, some of the things that I did and at the time, but I'm pretty sure that you would have people coming on who are ready and willing to discuss these ideas and take them, and maybe we get another chance to prove ourselves again,
Yeah, that's it. That is the idea. Folks like you and others who can share your experience. And
it's just not enough to just come on and chat. If that is the objective of the program, then I'm sorry I came. But if it is out of it, what I say, out of one come many, or out of many in this case, maybe come one, that we could have one objective to get things done. If it is possible to do that, I'm willing to be part of the conversation. But while we still have the time and the energy to do it. But but I do think that we have so much talent here, all wrong. That is a pity we can't harness it. And as Ambrose was saying, get some structure. And we have people who have strengths in a lot of areas. Some are going to be able to provide the structure. Some are going to be technical. Some are good implementers. Some, everybody would have their place. Everybody would have a role. But it's for us to embrace it all and put Grenada, where it should be and give recognition to the people who have brought us here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. And Andre is saying another great program, so much information and history. Thank you. And then there is, I think Clev is saying that hence the importance of establishing a gallery and annotating the accomplishments of the past to inform those of today. Tribalism.
Let me say, not just to inform, but to guide as well.
Yeah, as he says.
Yeah, it's not just to inform, because if you just tell people, that's it. But if you could find a way to make, to see what works. The wheel turns full circle all the time. The wheel is always turning. You always go back. Pretty soon you had to just go back. We already going back. Look at what COVID has forced us to do. Go back to 1912. Wash our hands, wear your mask, maintain your distance. Isn't that what happened in 1912? The wheel is turning full circle all the time, and so it is with life. So it's not just to inform people, because they'll forget tomorrow, but hopefully that people's actions and people's successes, we could learn from it to guide others and everything. But it needs to be etched in history. I firmly believe so.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And Babs is saying, Michelle, a wonderful program, lots of sharing. I wonder how many young persons are listening and learning. And Babs, we hope to have you sometime in the coming weeks, because you
I
have
hope so too.
have
Babs,
to speak
she's done a
about.
lot.
Yeah, she has done quite a lot, and the family as well.
Yes.
Sister,
And
and
on her
others.
own merit sometimes, her own back of her own pocket. These are the diehards. These are the people who do it regardless.
Mhm.
And Barbara is one of them.
Yeah, and despite the challenges year after year, and something about Babs, I noticed she does these things without much fuss.
Yes, yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
worries her. I mean, I don't know.
yeah,
I'm sorry about that, but I can't. I will
yeah.
give up.
I would get heated up. Barbara would
Yes,
be too.
I will. But
I
she's
would, I
doing
would
this
just get heated up.
calmly, and I guess as
Yeah,
much all because of the passion.
yeah.
Former sports minister Patrick Simpson's excellent program, Good Vision, Michelle. And Clev is coming and say thanks again for a very informative program. Stay well, Michelle. By the way, Sparrow say age is just a number. 70 is the new 40. And he's saying, I'm 45.
I'm 45.
you know. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Hannah Plenty is suggesting a Hall of Fame, maybe in the Olympic Center, the new Olympic Center. So, Michelle, thank you once again. I know
can't believe that
I
we
know
have
that.
spoken for this long. I
I
said,
told you so.
Michael, what am I going to say to you in all this in an hour? I can't go more than half.
I warn you.
And here we are.
Yeah, but thanks once again. Lots of information. I hope some other time, hopefully, we'll be able to, as I always do with the guests, that some other time we'll get to come back and chat again. Sometime probably as a tag team, you and somebody else, and things like that. So, as you say,
That would be nice.
yeah, they'll be able to jog your memory of certain things and things like that. So probably a tag team. Hazel might be a good person to to be
but
on the program.
But that is if we're speaking netball and track. But
Yeah,
overall, I mean, I'm pretty sure a tag team. There are lots of people as well.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And obviously, we hope to have Ambrose.
Oh, I would love to tag with
Yeah,
Ambrose.
he isn't ready as yet. He isn't ready as yet. But we will try to get him, because I believe when it comes to sports administration, Ambrose is one person that I believe can still offer a lot. Yes, times have changed, but I still believe he has a lot to offer. He may not want to
Structure.
and he may not want to be in the forefront, but I think probably as an advisor, as a consultant, he has a lot to offer just by how he got things done and his thought process currently. I think he has quite a lot. But again, sometimes, folks believe that the time has passed for certain people. And I'm saying until...
That's my point.
Yeah. And I had an argument with some folks again, and they asked, "Well, some people must move aside." Yeah, I think, yes, some people will move aside. But then at the same time, I think we have to get people involved and give people an opportunity to be involved as well, to be involved. And sometimes the environment doesn't present itself for people to get involved and make their contribution. But I think, Michelle, you have done quite a lot for sports, especially women's sport. And I'm hoping that the young ones, as Hazel Regis Buckle said in earlier, thanks for what you have done. I guess as much she would have heard about you, and you have one that probably would have inspired her. And I guess as much there's so many others who would have been inspired by what you would have been able to achieve.
And Hazel and Regis did the middle distance, right?
400, yeah.
No, the 400.
Yeah.
And when you think of people who came before her who were pretty good in the 4, like Jenny Boker. I mean, who remembers Jenny Boker? Jenny Boker was a very, very good athlete. Very, very. I think she set the tone, as I said, the tone for a lot of female athletes over that distance. Jenny did the 4 and the 8 as well, I think.
Yeah, and she also did she did the 4 and the 8. I think she got medals in 73 in Trinidad for the Carifta Games. And then there was even Jacinta Bartholomew. you know.
Well, Jacinta was afterwards. Jacinta
Yeah,
was
I'm
in the
talking about
80s.
in the 80s.
Yes.
Who came after?
Jacinta was in the 80s. But Jenny, I'm talking about the people who paved the way. That's why I keep on saying people like Donald Pear, who paved the way in middle distance running, and Morris Williams
Yeah.
in long distance. And so that's why I call it, because don't forget, I am from the 60s and early 70s. Jacinta was in the 80s. Jenny was in the 70s. You know, so I have I'm female athletes who did well in that time. I mean, it's just like Janice in netball was more in the 80s, although Janice played in the world tournament in 79, but she didn't mature. I think in competition as you know, as is only in the 80s. I think she really did mature into her own until then. But you know, so in the different disciplines, I'm just speaking. Vida, I think, had more impact in administration as coordinator of sports, and then go on to permanent secretary. You know, in that regard, I mean, you know, she played netball as well, but her impact, for example, as a woman in sport, has for me always been in coaching and as a coordinator of sports. And she was a coach in high school, coordinator of sports, and obviously when she went on to become permanent secretary in the Ministry of Sport. And similarly, people like Nadika McIntyre, may she rest in peace, you know, women who've blazed the trail. Nadika represented Grenada in women's cricket, in table tennis and in netball. You know, these are, she's a player again of the 70s. You know, so there really have been a lot of women in sport. My thing coming on today was mainly to show that. I think that's what you asked me to do.
Yeah.
But although I really did have some administrative role, but my bigger role was as an athlete and you know, performing as an athlete. And I mean here netball, track and field, everything, badminton, everything. That's where I, you know, made my mark, as it were.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
As Pele Dabo would say, he always was so thrilled to all the matches we played on the Public Workers Union court in the back there. We used to play a lot of our netball matches there. Pele Dabo would say, boy, I just want to go down to see Michaele Hercules' skirt go up in the air and come back home. That naughty boy.
You can't take it away. All right. Thanks, Dr. Way to end.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Michelle, and I appreciate you being on the program. We have made 2 hours and 45 minutes, 2 3/4. That is quite a lot, you know. And I want to thank you because we're hoping that we can get more of you, you know, others like you, to be on the program, to share their stories, to discuss, to talk about things, how they did those things in the past. And, you know, and as indicated, you know, look, your neighbor for 30 years didn't even know half of what you were talking about. There are others who didn't even know how your name was actually spelled, you know, all these sort of things. So quite a lot, I thought, was, you know, we gained quite a lot from your deliberations this afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me. You know, as I said, I was very reluctant to come, but you know, I guess we just, once you get into it, it's difficult now to get us off now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But thanks a lot, and thank you to your viewers too who made comments. You know, the Depretin brothers are always there, always, you know, always one of my favorites. Not only from Pan but otherwise, because they're constantly making contributions. They always here in Grenada. And, you know, I think they're so patriotic as well. They have Grenada at heart. Old school.
And they want you to be back. They want you to be back at the wharf. Eh?
They want me to.
Yeah, they thought you was.
I always played mass with the wharf.
So yeah, they thought you was.
I always played carnival with Angel Harps. So I
with Angel Harps. Okay, that's why. Yeah.
So
somehow they always thought you was a wharf girl. Yeah. Thanks very much once again, Michelle.
But I was born there.
Oh, okay, right. But as you indicated, you still have the River Road thing in you too.
Yes, 2 years in River Road.
Right. I believe that is where the sporting talents came from. Yeah. Thank you once again, Michelle. All the best. Okay.
Thanks, Michael. And you take care of yourself too as well in that COVID environment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care. Right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Okay. Okay then, folks. That was Michelle Hercules. Well, let's say Michael Hercules, as she said. You know, she couldn't attend the convent with the boy's name, but they wanted her to be Michael, you know. But that's it. So nice having you folks once again. Thanks for all those who made the program possible, and Margaret and Patrick Simmons, Andrea Mitchell, um, Andrea St. Bernard Mitchell, yeah, and Cleve and Toro, and all the others. Hannah, thank you very much for your contribution. Goti Robinson and Robert, nice having you on this afternoon. And earlier we had Bob Simpson and Harold Paisidi and all the others who made a contribution to the program. Not forgetting this is Vida Bruno Victor, and as I said, George Goti Robinson and Ambrose, who is in the background. Former Sports Minister Adrian Spaceman Mitchell. It was nice having you on today's program. We'll have to chat with you some other time. But folks, join us again on Thursday, 6:30 in the evening, when we do have another in the Talk Sports series. And then next Saturday, the Saturday edition, and that's the Saturday Sports Special, the longer version of the Talk Sports program from 1 o'clock on Saturday. So until Thursday at 6:30, ciao, stay safe, remain negative. Okay? I know it sounds as a joke, but no, it's serious, you know. I really mean for you to, stay positive, but stay focused. You have to be, and see what you can do to help those who are in need, but continue to observe the necessary protocols as prescribed by the medical experts, which is basically wear face covering, wash your hands, and maintain social distancing. It's serious, folks. You have been looking at the news and you will see that it's something very serious. Thank you once again, and see you on Thursday at 6:30.